Once, there was a mighty red dragon driven by vengeance against humanity for the slaughter of its kin. Its ambitions crumbled in a decisive battle, leaving bitterness and hatred in its heart. In its final moments, it believed its thirst for vengeance would remain unquenched. But fate had a cruel twist in store for the dragon. Inexplicably, it was reborn as a helpless human baby, a twist that defied all expectations. The dragon couldn't fathom how these puny humans had managed to defeat him. He had never imagined it possible. This time, they had gathered an entire squad of capable individuals, each armed to the teeth. The dragon couldn't help but think, it's over. The humans had a mysterious witch leading them, someone who directed their attacks with precision, targeting the dragon's weak points. The dragon marveled at the competence of the humans on the battlefield. It was as if they had assembled an elite squad with full sets of armaments. With a resolute shout, the witch declared the end for the monstrous being. To every human present, this was the culmination of their efforts, the end the behemoth deserved. As he faced his end, the dragon couldn't help but reflect. Did he truly deserve this fate? He had never intruded into human territory. In fact, humans had relentlessly attacked him for millennia. They had hunted him down repeatedly, sacrificing their own kind to do so. The dragon's memory was fragmented, with recollections of humans relentlessly pursuing him. Whenever he found a place to call home, humans would appear out of nowhere, attacking him and those he cared about for no reason. They killed his friends, wiped out his family, and displayed their remains as trophies of brutality. Finally, the dragon had reached his breaking point. With a furious roar, he unleashed a massive flame, incinerating everything around him. He had become the last dragon, with nothing left to his name and no one left to lose. Revenge was the sole reason for his existence. Surrounded by the very humans he loathed, he could finally close his eyes and rest. The last legendary red dragon had fallen, seeking peace in his slumber. In the depths of his dreams, he heard a sweet voice calling him affectionately. A blinding light drew nearer, and he felt utter confusion. Emerging from the light was a smiling human holding a tiny, delightful baby. The dragon couldn't comprehend why he was in the arms of a human. All he knew was that he needed to escape this place as soon as possible. He tried to feel for his wings, but they were nowhere to be found. Outwardly, he resembled a normal, tantrum-throwing infant. Inwardly, he dreaded the possibility that he had become a human. The man holding him celebrated proudly in front of his wife, declaring that the baby liked him. Inside the newborn dragon, a sense of humiliation burned. He wanted this filthy human to release him immediately. He couldn't tolerate such humiliation after all he had endured. Ray had no intentions of letting these humans treat him like an ordinary baby. Deep inside, he harbored a burning desire to unleash his fiery wrath and show them the true power they were dealing with. To them, he appeared as nothing more than a trembling infant, leaving the man and woman in bed utterly clueless about his true nature. Once he believed he had stored enough fiery power, Ray decided to release it. However, instead of the destructive dragon breath he had once commanded, all he managed to produce was a tiny glob of spit. His mighty magic had been reduced to a mere droplet. The man was taken aback by the baby's peculiar actions, while Ray himself questioned what had happened to his once monumental magic. The woman, seemingly unperturbed, reached out to pick him up, her sweet words filled with terrifying implications. In her larger, human hands, Ray felt immense fear. He had been thrust into a life of torment, with this beautiful woman welcoming him into a world he didn't understand. To him, Ray sounded like a laughable, insignificant name for a being with a dragon's heart. These humans were entirely oblivious to the powerful dragon spirit residing within him. Ray felt a surge of determination. If fate had granted him this second chance at life as a human, he was determined to exact his revenge. Just as they had done to his brethren, he would make humans pay for their crimes. With his new human body, he vowed to kill every single one of them. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. He was destined to become a menace to society. The infant's laughter took on a devious tone, leaving the man puzzled by how such a small newborn could seem so naughty. He couldn't shake the feeling that this baby was going to be a handful. Regardless, this was their child, their beloved baby. As Ray's tiny brain filled with thoughts of annihilation, exhaustion washed over him. Controlling his baby mouth had drained his energy, and he drifted off to sleep. He couldn't help but criticize the weakness of the human body. Planning humanity's downfall while needing a nap seemed absurd. When he opened his eyes, he found himself under a wide blue sky, surrounded by the refreshing embrace of nature. Time passed and Ray, now living as a human, had learned much about mankind. He had even discovered the names of his parents, Scarlet and Jake. Scarlett's beauty matched her kind and gentle personality, while Jake's muscular physique set him apart as a strong and capable human. Their visitors arrived, and Scarlett and Jake welcomed them with open arms. The villagers held the couple in high regard, praising Jake for his remarkable swordsmanship and Scarlett for her formidable magical abilities. Their humility in response to such praise only endeared them further to the villagers. As Ray, their baby, crawled on the floor, the villagers marveled at his intelligence. Most children his age couldn't communicate their hunger, yet Ray did so effortlessly. They also noticed the subtle reddish tint to his hair, a curious development in a child so young. According to Jake, Ray's hair had started turning red a few days ago. In Ray's mind, his thoughts continued to swirl with questions and plans. Ray's fiery hair continued to grow, a clear sign that some of his dragon powers remained within him. He could almost sense his dragon form emerging, ready to be unleashed upon the world. As the visitors bid farewell, Jake requested their help in chasing away the beasts plaguing their farms. The dependable man assured them he would personally take care of the issue. Once outside the Talon house, the villagers began to gossip among themselves, questioning if the Talon family might be cursed. Ray overheard their words and interpreted it as fear of his red hair, reveling in the intimidation he believed it caused. Scarlett lifted Ray onto the feeding table, her and Jake's unconditional love and care confusing him. No matter how mischievous he was, they never scolded him. He had even attempted outlandish pranks, like peeing in Jake's mouth while he slept, but his parents had simply laughed it off. Scarlet Talon possessed incredible water mage abilities, a rarity even among adventurers. Ray couldn't help but think that having such magic at his disposal would make his future revenge even more achievable. At the age of 2, children had the chance to undergo a mage evaluation to determine their potential for mana. Today was Ray's assessment day, and his father wished him good luck before he embarked on the journey. As the carriage set off, Ray was brimming with confidence, believing he was destined to pass and reclaim his draconic magic. After a long carriage ride, Ray was awakened by his mother's cheerful voice. He observed the bustling town with a mixture of curiosity and concern, particularly regarding his frail human body. They strolled through the central marketplace, where merchants hawked their wares and businessmen pursued profits. One well-to-do merchant boasted about his intermediate quality beast crystals when a beggar approached them, asking for food. The merchant cruelly scolded and kicked the beggar, showing no compassion. Ray watched this scene unfold with a sense of tragedy. Despite all being humans, they ridiculed and belittled those weaker than themselves. In his previous life, he had considered it his duty to protect the weak, regardless of their form or species. Although he had failed in his past life, he remained committed to that ideal. Dragons, he thought, had the right attitude. While being carried in his mother's arms, they finally arrived at the bustling Roland Academy. The line to take the mage evaluation extended from the academy entrance, and Ray eagerly joined it. An attendant guided them, ensuring an orderly queue where candidates would be called by name. Ray had never seen so many people in one place, and his excitement soared. In the background, those who had failed the test grieved, their disappointment palpable. Ray's determination burned. He was confident he'd ace this mage assessment. The candidate ahead of them created a scene, throwing a tantrum over her perceived unfairness of the assessment after failing. Ray found this all too familiar. In his eyes, this world had always been unjust. Finally, an attendant called Ray's name, marking his turn to undergo the mage evaluation. Scarlett and Ray were asked to step forward, and a hint of nervousness flickered on Scarlett's face. This was the moment of truth for Ray. The robed, bearded facilitator of the evaluation instructed Ray to place his hands on a crystal ball. If he had magic aptitude, it would glow, and the color would reveal his elemental affinity. Ray eagerly complied, confident that the mighty red dragon within him would astound everyone. As moments passed, Ray began to hear his mother cry behind him. He initially attributed it to her being overwhelmed by his magical talent or the shared elemental affinity. However, when the crystal ball remained unlit, he realized something was amiss. The facilitator concluded the evaluation, declaring Ray without magic aptitude. Ray found this verdict absurd. After all, when had anyone ever heard of a dragon without magical capabilities? In his past life, he'd been the most potent red dragon. Scarlett appealed to the facilitator, unwilling to accept the results. She graduated from this very academy, making it hard to believe her child had no magical talent. Ray, however, couldn't stand this perceived disrespect. He aggressively tapped the crystal ball in frustration, convinced it was malfunctioning. He was determined to prove them wrong. The facilitator, apologizing again, took the crystal ball away. But Ray refused to relent. He stood up, grabbing onto the facilitator's long white beard, convinced the man was lying to them. Guards had to be called to intervene. Late at night, Ray and his mother boarded the carriage once more, heading home. Ray pondered whether this was a punishment from the heavens for his past actions. If so, what was the point of his reincarnation? However, a thought occurred to him. Perhaps the heavens were testing him. Ray remained optimistic, determined to find another way to exact his revenge. Morning came, and the Talon family gathered for breakfast, their mood subdued. Ray broke the silence, calling out to his father. He asked Jake to teach him how to fight, a request that brought a smile to Jake's face, eager to impart his knowledge of swordsmanship. Ray's next move was to become a red-haired Zoro. Learning magic might not be in the cards, but he could still pursue swordsmanship. Revenge was his driving force, and he was determined to achieve it one way or another. Facing him with a confident smile stood his father. For 2 years he had been learning swordsmanship from Jake, but he had yet to win even once. They both wielded wooden swords. With a serious expression, Ray intended to change his zero-win record today. Drawing his wooden sword, he saw his chance as Jake swung his sword wide with a casual smile. Ray just needed to seize the moment and pit it at the exact time Jake swung down. Victory seemed within reach. But as he was about to execute his move, he slipped on the grass. Frustration washed over him as he questioned why things always turned out this way. Before he could recover from his blunder, the wooden sword was already dangerously close to his face. With a wooden thud, he was knocked out cold. He couldn't understand why his body never seemed to keep up with his mind. When he woke up, Scarlet was tending to his injuries while Jake chuckled at another loss for his son. Scarlet scolded Jake for not holding back with their 4-year-old, fearing that he would not pass the night trials if this continued. Jake reasoned that Ray was simply young and needed time to develop control over his body. They had a year left, and Ray could still enter the Avrian Academy. Ray reassured his parents, determined to prove himself. He believed that as the reincarnation of a red dragon, he could never be as weak as a mere human. He expressed his determination to become the strongest. Back on the training grounds, Ray knew he was more capable than humans of his age, but what he lacked was control. The human body frustrated him with its clumsiness, forcing him to move each limb separately. He swung his wooden sword tirelessly, seeking improvement. Then Jake surprised him by handing him a real steel sword. Ray was taken aback by this gift, a weapon almost as tall as he was. His father believed that practicing with a real sword would improve his control faster. Smiling, Jake whispered to Ray about another gift waiting for him in their house's storage room. Ray's father had one more surprise in store, a magic puppet. Although it appeared ordinary, it was powered by magic, making it a unique and exciting gift. The students of Avrian Knight Academy used these objects for training. As Ray stared at the so-called magic puppet, he couldn't see what was so special about it. To convince him, Jake urged his son to give it a try. Ray cautiously approached the puppet, gripping his wooden sword. With a straightforward rush, he launched his attack. Surprisingly, the puppet sprang to life, activating its level 1 capability. Ray was taken aback as his wide swing met the puppet's wooden shield. Panic briefly set in as the puppet countered with a swing of its blade, knocking Ray's weapon from his hand. In a single exchange, the puppet had defeated him and concluded its level 1 operation. Ray's defeat was evident. Jake watched with a smile from a distance, pleased with his son's reaction to the gift. He reassured Ray that if he could conquer the first level of the puppet, it would guarantee his success in the exams. The puppet had been obtained through many of Jake's connections as a thoughtful gift for his son. Ray, despite his initial shock at losing to the puppet, was now fueled by determination. He was resolute in his goal to triumph over this puppet. In the serene surroundings under the clear blue skies, the sound of determined grunts filled the air as Ray swung his sword repeatedly. However, his movements still lagged behind his thoughts. As Ray lay in frustration, his sword nearby, he realized that this human body was holding him back. He needed to improve significantly to defeat even the first level of the puppet, let alone seek revenge against humanity. As he tried to stand, he heard an unfamiliar voice questioning why he wanted to battle a puppet. Alarmed, he readied himself for a counterattack, demanding to know who was there. To his surprise, he was met by a blonde girl in a red hooded cloak, about the same age as him. She introduced herself as Amy and explained that she lived in a nearby village. She had noticed him still on the mountain at this late hour and had come to remind him to leave before dark. Ray relaxed, realizing that she meant no harm. She continued by explaining that the area near the magic forest was dangerous at night due to magic beasts. Ray hadn't been aware that magic beasts roamed this area. Amy seemed knowledgeable about the mountains, as she often gathered fruits and vegetables nearby. She offered to accompany him down the mountain as the sun was setting, and he agreed. As they walked, he made a mental note of her name, Amy. Before he could introduce himself, she interrupted, already knowing his name. Ray was famous in the village, and he couldn't escape the attention. While the villagers praised his size and growth, there was an underlying fear of his supposed curse due to his red hair. They respected his parents but regarded him with unfounded fear, making him feel like a foreign entity in the village. Each whispered remark stung him deeply, and he couldn't help but feel like an outcast, even though his parents were still alive. Terrifying red dragons to frighten their children. Red was a color symbolizing strength and evil in human society, which was ironic considering that it was the greedy humans who had driven the dragons to near extinction. Now, they were the ones being painted as evil in stories. Dragons used their immense power and fire to seek revenge and protect themselves, but humans interpreted it as proof of their brutality. Amy noticed that Ray had stopped in his tracks and called out to him to hurry up. As they walked side by side, leaving the mountains behind, Amy mentioned that she had seen him around these parts quite often lately. Ray confirmed that he had been practicing swordsmanship, intending to become a swordsman like his father. Amy knew that Ray's father was the only swordsman in the village and asked if he planned to sign up for the Knight Academy. Ray confirmed his intention to do so. Amy shared that her brother was also planning to take the exam. She thought her brother might be a bit envious of Ree since he had Jake as a mentor, while others in the village couldn't learn proper swordsmanship. She suggested that Ree and her brother could become friends and practice together. As they were about to exit the mountains, they heard the sound of approaching footsteps. A loud, overbearing voice called out to them. It was a similarly blonde boy with his two sidekicks, addressing Ray as Red Hair and demanding that he leave his sister alone. The boy's face was indeed punchable, and his confrontational attitude irked Ray. Amy stepped between them and called her brother Gary out for being rude when Ray hadn't done anything wrong. Gary questioned his sister for hanging around with Red Hair and warned her that Ray's curse might be contagious. He even checked to see if her hair had turned red. Gary's two cronies approached Ray arrogantly, hurling insults and trash-talking him. They called him shameless and told him to leave the village. They mocked Ray's parents, insinuating that they couldn't sympathize with the common folk. Ray clenched his fist in anger as he endured the insults, but when the group walked away, he couldn't take it anymore. He angrily called out to them, and in a split second, his fist was hurtling through the air, aimed at the face of the goon who had been talking trash. Gary quickly shoved the guy aside, taking the punch with his arm guard, but it still caused him sharp pain. Ray's punch sent the goon flying, and Gary warned his cronies not to interfere. He offered to fight Ray without using a weapon, thinking that Ray had probably received extensive training from his adventurer parents. Amy tried her best to stop the impending fight, but Ray seemed ready for the challenge. With tensions rising, Ray and Gary appeared on the verge of a showdown, while Amy did her best to prevent the confrontation. Ray was ready for the challenge as he threw his sword aside, assuming a fighting stance. He turned towards Gary and his sidekicks, prepared to face them all at once. The sounds of blows being exchanged echoed through the woods, accompanied by cheers from Gary's cronies and Amy's desperate cries for them to stop. After several exchanges, Ray was finally struck by a solid punch to the face, sending him sprawling to the ground. His coin sack flew out of his pockets during the fall, and Gary promptly caught it. He urged Ray to admit defeat, but Ray, determined and frustrated, struggled to stand back up despite the dirt and bruises covering his body. Gary continued to belittle Ray, claiming that he was too weak and disappointing. He insinuated that Ray had received special treatment from his father during training and still couldn't measure up. In the end, Gary urged Ray to give up on becoming a swordsman and focus on something he was actually good at. Ray fell onto the grass, battered and defeated, the echo of Gary's harsh words ringing in his ears. Back in an ordinary house in the village, Gary and Amy arrived home. Amy scolded her brother for going too far, but Gary insisted that Ray deserved it. He warned his sister to stay away from the red-haired kid, as many people were scared of that cursed hair color. He emphasized that they were different from the Talon family, whose parents were just ordinary people. Frustrated, Amy screamed at her brother that she hated him and stormed off, leaving Gary, dirty and bruised, to tend to himself. At the Talon house, Ray had finally picked himself up and walked back home. His mother cheerfully prepared dinner and welcomed her son back from training. However, upon seeing Rei covered in bruises and dirt, she grew concerned and asked if he had been in a fight. Rei shrugged it off, claiming it was just practice, but Scarlet wouldn't let it go. She suspected that he was being bullied by the village kids, though Rei continued to deny it. Despite her worries about her son's injuries leaving scars, Rei insisted that it was alright because he was a man. Jake, the carefree father, smiled with approval, praising Rei for his dedication to training. Rei informed his parents that he wanted to continue practicing, and he headed to the storage room. There he activated the magic puppet to level 1 and began combat training. The puppet dashed towards him with a shield bash, but Rei skillfully dodged it. However, his wooden sword got caught on a pillar in the storage room, distracting him. Seizing the opportunity, the magic puppet struck Rei at the back of his head while he was off guard. The next day, Rei found himself back in the beautiful mountains, surrounded by lush greenery and a bright blue sky. As he headed to his usual training spot, he spotted a familiar figure waiting for him. It was Amy. She looked a bit nervous, scanning the area as if she'd been waiting for him. When she saw Rei approaching, her cheerful expression turned into embarrassment, no doubt remembering what her brother had done. But she greeted Rei with a wide smile, waving joyfully. It was clear she'd been waiting for this moment to apologize in person. Rei, the forgiving soul, assured her that it wasn't a big deal and certainly not her fault. After all, he realized that he simply wasn't strong enough to fend off her brother. Amy's eyes welled up with genuine remorse, and Rei couldn't help but think that humans were indeed a troublesome bunch. It appeared he needed to work on his social skills at such a young age. Rei walked closer to Amy, plucked an apple from her basket, took a bite, and declared it as a symbol of accepting her apology. Amy reassured him that her brother Gary wouldn't trouble him anymore. From that day onward, Amy would be there at the same time and place, sometimes chatting away while Rei diligently swung his sword, other times sitting in peaceful silence, absorbed in her book. Before long, Rei had grown used to her presence, and the friendship blossomed. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the Talon family home, a cavalry of armored soldiers and combat horses had gathered. The leader of the troops delivered great news to Jake and Scarlet. The nearby villages had also been attacked by the same mysterious threat. There were no clear witnesses, but victims had been infected, rendering them unable to explain what had happened. The leader sought Jake and Scarlet's assistance. Scarlet knew that these creatures typically didn't appear near human settlements, and the situation was far from normal. She proposed that she accompany her husband on this mission, but Jake, with unwavering confidence, assured her that it would be a routine reconnaissance mission. Besides, Rei was about to take the Avrian Mage Academy's entrance exam, so one of them needed to stay with their son. He comforted her, promising to return quickly and stay safe. Back in the mountains, the setting sun painted the skies with vibrant hues as Rei struggled to catch his breath after a day of rigorous training. He turned to find Annie quietly absorbed in her book, bathed in the sunset's brilliance. It sent his heart racing, and he had to snap himself out of a daydream, blushing in embarrassment. Rei approached Amy and suggested they call it a day and head home. She was so engrossed in her book and the serene surroundings that she hadn't even realized how late it had gotten. On the way home, Rei couldn't help but ask if she was facing any trouble in the village because of her friendship with him, given all the rumors circulating about him. Rei couldn't help but worry about how his red hair curse might affect Amy. He was concerned that she could be dragged into his troubles. However, Amy was resolute in her belief that it was their problem, not hers. She found Rei's red hair rather cool, and beyond that, she saw him as a special person deep inside. With her signature bright smile, she encouraged Rei to just be himself, and it warmed his heart. Amy's words reminded him of Gary's hurtful remarks, pushing him to find something he was good at. A smile slowly spread across his face as he felt something click. He eagerly thanked Amy for clearing his mind, and with newfound excitement, he rushed back home, looking forward to their next meeting. Back in the middle of the night, within the Talon House's storage room, the magic puppet activated to its first level. Rei bit down on the wooden sword's handle, crouched on all fours, and unleashed his true self. With nimble and natural movements, he moved like a wild beast, realizing that he was much more agile using all his limbs. Now was the time to put his newfound skills to the test. The magic puppet swung its wooden sword, and Rei jumped high above, landing swiftly behind the puppet. The robotic voice informed him that he had passed level 1, and Rei celebrated this victory. His idea of returning to his dragon-like fighting style had paid off. As the sun rose, the Talon household bustled with Jake's preparations. Rei had just woken up and saw his father fully armored, getting ready for a quest. Jake apologized to his son for having to leave temporarily, but assured him that he would return in time for the Night Academy exam. Encouraging Ray to practice with the puppet in his absence, Jake left with a confident smile, believing in his son's abilities. The driver of the carriage called for Jake's departure, and Scarlett handed him his longsword. The couple exchanged affectionate words before parting ways, leaving Ray with a sense of reassurance. As Ray made his way to his training spot on the mountain, he contemplated how his father would react to his newfound strength. He was determined to impress him upon his return. He credited Amy for helping him find a solution to his training struggles. While Ray still had reservations about humans, he couldn't help but feel a growing connection to his parents, Jake and Scarlett, and a sense of becoming more human as time passed. Ray, with the weight of his past and the recent lessons he had learned, found himself back at his usual training spot. He was determined not to seek revenge on those few who had treated him decently, like Amy, his dear friend. As he trained tirelessly, the thought of Amy crossed his mind, and he couldn't help but feel expectant, even embarrassed by his own feelings. He reminded himself that it was better that she wasn't there, as he needed to focus on his training. Time was of the essence, and he couldn't afford to be swayed by human emotions any longer. Hours passed, and the sun began to set. Ray, now lying on the comfortable-looking grass, woke up with a start. It was already late, and he knew he'd be in trouble with his mom if he didn't hurry home. As he rushed back to the village, thoughts of Amy returned. He hadn't properly thanked her for her advice, but he decided to do so tomorrow. Ray made it back to the village without any issues, but the sky had grown dark. Villagers were frantically gathering, holding torches, and searching for something or someone. Gary and Amy's father had a desperate look in his eyes as he asked the village blacksmith if he had seen his children. The blacksmith mentioned that he had seen the kids buying weapons earlier, saying something about going to the forest to hunt magic beasts. The news hit Amy and Gary's parents hard, and the villagers criticized the blacksmith for allowing the children to buy weapons. Gary and Amy's father immediately took action, calling for the guards to join the search for their kids. Ray, on the other hand, casually walked past the panicked villagers, his mind focused solely on the fate of Gary's group. He felt that they were getting a taste of their own medicine, but he didn't wish harm upon Amy, who had treated him kindly. However, she was stuck with her reckless brother, and Ray couldn't shake off the thought that karma was at play. As the villagers organized a search party with torches in hand, Ray's cold perspective started to shift. He couldn't ignore the image of Amy's lively face calling out to him, and he realized he had a choice to make. Despite his initial reluctance, he turned back, a sense of urgency taking over. He knew he couldn't abandon Amy, the one person who had shown him kindness. With determination, Ray rushed toward the forest, hoping that Amy was safe and waiting for him. He hadn't thanked her properly for her help with the puppet, and he wasn't about to let her down now. Deep in the forest, wolf beast bodies were scattered about, and Ray was determined to find her. On the ground, amidst the fallen wolves, lay Gary's two sidekicks, unconscious. Gary himself stood bravely, clutching a sword as he attempted to shield Amy from the menacing creature they faced. Amy cried out in fear, her brother trembling as he tried to gather his resolve. They were confronted by a battle-scarred, three-eyed magical wolf beast, a monstrous adversary. Ray, aware that he was running out of time, sprinted as fast as his legs could carry him. Gasping for breath, he pushed himself to his limits, desperately plunging deeper into the forest. As he went further, the scent of fresh blood hung in the air, raising the stakes. It seemed that Amy might indeed be in grave danger. When he reached the scene and leaned against a tree for support, he found disappointment instead of relief. The scent led to a young demonic wolf with a blade wound on its stomach, recently injured. Ray was puzzled. It seemed the kids had killed a young pup. Confusingly, the footsteps around were all jumbled, making it difficult for him to determine the direction to follow. While pondering his next move, a familiar scream pierced the air. It was Amy's voice. Yuri, the leader of Gary's group, was taking on the massive demonic wolf and, as expected, was getting battered, crashing into the trees. Meanwhile, Amy rushed to her brother's side. The demonic wolf, undeterred, leaped forward, its jaws wide open, emitting a savage howl as it descended upon them, its intent clear, to devour the children. Helpless, Amy closed her eyes, resigned to their grim fate. She cried out for anyone to help them. In the midst of the chaos, blood spurted onto the ground. Then, a gleam of steel caught Amy's eye. It was Ray wielding his sword. He thrust it into the beast's mouth, stopping its attack. Ray had arrived in the nick of time, a true savior. He asked if Amy was all right, and she confirmed her safety. But the other kids were in bad shape. Without warning, the demonic wolf launched another assault, this time scratching Rei on the shoulder. Rei stumbled backward, struggling to maintain his balance. He quickly reassured Amy that he wouldn't go down so easily. Rei formulated a plan to lead the monstrous wolf away from Amy. He jumped onto a tree branch, and the beast adjusted its position, preparing to pounce. Rei narrowly evaded the attack, showcasing his incredible agility. But deep down, he was frustrated with his own weakness. He was barely holding his own against the demonic wolf. In the past, such a creature would have posed no threat to him, but now he was nearing his limit. Despite his exceptional speed, he couldn't divert the wolf's attention away from Amy for long. The demonic wolf responded to Rei's call and charged once more, jaws open wide. Rei knew he had to make this attack count. He met the ferocious charge head-on, sword in hand, under the crimson moonlight. Rei clenched his teeth and clung onto the wolf's snout determined. With a swift and skillful swing, he struck one of the beast's three eyes, making him seem like a character out of Demon Slayer. The wolf howled in pain, attempting to shake him off, sending him hurtling toward the ground. Despite his grievous injuries, Rei managed to stand and shield Amy. In the past, he could have easily torn apart this demonic wolf with a single blow. But now he was reliant on a human weapon, his trusty sword, to face it with one eye less. The demonic wolf charged again, seemingly undeterred. Rei saw an opening in its attack, grasping the opportunity to sever one of its legs with a swift swing of his blade. The wolf landed heavily, closer to where Emmy and Gary were. The impact of the beast's landing sent Emmy and Gary flying. They struggled to get up, and Rei rushed to check on their well-being. The wolf, desperate and injured, tried to reach them with its sharp claws, but managed to land a critical strike on Rei, slashing his skin. Rei, now with the sword back in his teeth, was determined to end the fight. He wanted the monster to submit to him. He spun through the air like a tornado, slicing and dicing through the wolf's massive body, delivering a spectacular finisher. The demonic wolf was so severely wounded that blood gushed from multiple parts of its colossal form. Rei had exerted all his power and stamina to execute that deadly move. He tumbled to the ground, looking around to find Amy and her brother. They lay unconscious nearby. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something peculiar. A strange alert and a small, burning fire that materialized into a cute, fiery draconic creature. It held up a sign indicating a reward, unlocking the initial stages of the blessing of the dragon's eye and obtaining an intermediate-grade beast crystal. Rei contemplated whether to absorb the beast crystal, while the adorable draconic creature continued to make cheerful sounds. He disregarded the prompt, considering it a bunch of useless information. His priority was to locate and save Amy and her brother to prevent attracting more magic beasts. Summoning every ounce of strength, Rei struggled to stand, his wounds still oozing blood. Gary regained consciousness for a moment and recognized Rei as the boy he had beaten earlier, the one who had just saved them from certain death. Rei instructed him not to move as he carried both Gary and Amy. His strength was pushed to its absolute limit. The brother and sister had passed out, while Rei, with his severe injuries, persevered. He covered the other two unconscious children with loose twigs and rocks to shield them from potential danger, doing all he could with the resources at hand. The rest was left to fate as they remained deep within the forest. The villagers grew more agitated as their search party failed to find any clues about the missing children in the thick forest. Frustration was mounting among them. Suddenly, their eyes lit up as they spotted the red-haired kid from the Talon family, battered and covered in blood, carrying the two blonde siblings. They immediately tried to contact the parents and urged them to come to the scene. Rei, exhausted and suffering from grievous injuries, pleaded with the adults to help the kids, who needed immediate healing. Then he collapsed onto the ground. The villagers began murmuring among themselves, puzzled by the fact that these children had willingly entered the forest filled with magic beasts at night. They couldn't fathom why the kids would take such a risk. Amid the crowd, a frantic mother, bearing a resemblance to a lunch lady, rushed through, pushing people aside. She was the mother of the other two missing kids, Bob and Kyle. Upon learning that only the two blonde siblings had made it out of the magic forest, she refused to accept this information. She attempted to rush into the forest, but was stopped by the villagers who told her it was too dangerous to go in alone. Determined to rescue her sons, she forced her way through the crowd, accusing the villagers of cowardice for not searching for her children. She ran across the bridge, firmly believing her boys were waiting for her rescue. As she called out anxiously to her kids, she felt the ominous presence of magical beasts lurking in the forest's darkness. Sensing a beast with three eyes, she panicked and fled the forest, humiliated by her own cowardice. Turning her attention to the exhausted and injured Ray, she grabbed him by the collar and aggressively interrogated him about Bob and Kyle's whereabouts. She refused to believe her sons would willingly enter the forest. She accused Ray of tricking them and demanded he confess. She even slapped Ray hard, convinced that his red hair was a sign of calamity and misfortune. The villagers started whispering among themselves, joining the notion that Ray was responsible for leading the kids into the dangerous forest because he was the only one to return awake. They formed a mob against him, pouring blame without hesitation. The lady continued to slap him relentlessly, while the villagers accused him of leaving the others in the forest to die. Despite the pain he was enduring, Ray couldn't help but smile knowingly. He had already informed everyone that the kids were still in the forest, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. The lady regarded him with utmost contempt, labeling him a cold-blooded monster she could never forgive. Meanwhile, the villagers seemed to forget that he too was just a child, all because of the color of his hair. In their eyes, he was no longer considered one of them, just a symbol of their superstitions. The villagers saw Ray as a monster, and the lady from the mob menacingly approached him, clutching a torch. Ray feared the worst, wondering if she intended to do something terrible. He thought she needed professional help, like being locked up in a mental institution. To Ray, these villagers were far more terrifying than any magical beast he had encountered. They were the real monsters. As the lady raised the burning torch, repeating her curses and vowing never to forgive him, Ray felt the weight of impending doom. It seemed he was about to meet a cruel end at the hands of humanity once again. Ray prepared to accept his fate, contemplating the humiliation of being killed by a mere torch. But then, just as the torch was about to descend, it made a metallic sound and stopped. Gary had intervened, wielding his armed guard to shield the injured Ray. The villagers interpreted this as Gary being charmed by the red-haired monster, believing that he had gone mad. Gary ridiculed the adults, berating them for their baseless assumptions and refusal to think rationally. He wouldn't let them harm the person who had saved him. Ray couldn't help but feel astonished at how the children displayed more common sense than the adults in the village. The lady's hateful gaze, as she continued to blame and curse him, merged with memories of his past life, where he had faced a similar fate. In that life, the star of calamity had brought about his demise, driven by the hatred of mighty warriors who wanted him dead. Ray's eyes snapped open as he woke from the nightmarish flashback. His injuries were slowly healing, thanks to the care they had received. Scarlet, his mother, had stayed by his side the entire time, even sleeping beside him, holding his hand. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clung to her son. Ray, in his own way, wondered how humans could be so beautiful, pondering this profound question despite his recent ordeal. Scarlet's joy knew no bounds when she realized her son was awake. She hugged him tightly, momentarily forgetting that he was still recovering. She was just so overjoyed to see him awake. Ray's sense of time was hazy, but it seemed he had been in recovery for about a week. Scarlet was overcome with emotion as she explained the situation. The two kids he had saved, Gary and Amy, were doing well, with only minor injuries. However, Bob and Kayla were still missing in the forest, and it was likely they had met a tragic fate. Reflecting on that night, Gary had gone to great lengths to shield Ray from the irrational mob of villagers, especially the lady who seemed unhinged. He repeatedly told the truth that they had ventured into the forest on their own, and Ray had saved them. However, the adults refused to believe this, convinced that Gary was under Ray's malevolent influence. Gary vehemently denied this, trying to make the villagers see reason. Amidst all this chaos, Scarlet rushed to the gathering of villagers, desperate to reach her son. She witnessed Ray surrounded by an angry mob with malicious intentions, their faces twisted with anger. Taking in the dire situation, Scarlet could only hope that reason would prevail and her son would find justice. The gentle mage, Mrs. Talon, started radiating her magical powers outwardly. She appeared ready to unleash her magic on the villagers who had wronged her son. With cold determination, she demanded to know who had harmed her child. The villagers, acting as if they had gone mad, tried to urge Scarlet to calm down. They claimed that her unconscious son, lying on the ground, was the one responsible for leading the other kids into the forest, and therefore, he should take responsibility for his actions. In the midst of the chaos, Gary was the only one thinking clearly. He attempted to reason with Scarlet, reminding her that she was a mother too and should understand the pain. But Scarlet's magical aura was so overpowering that it silenced the heartless woman who had beaten Ray. She trembled and wept as Scarlet held her son tightly, her fierce gaze making her cry out for help to rescue Bob and Cal. The villagers, however, filled with scorn, directed their anger toward Scarlet and Ray, pitying the weeping woman but continuing to trash-talk the young child, convinced that he was cursed. Scarlet heard their spiteful words, but they paid her no attention. Inside the Talon household, Scarlet comforted Ray, assuring him that everything would be all right and that the events were in the past. She didn't want her son to blame himself. Gary, who had witnessed it all, shared a detailed account of the true events with her. Filled with admiration, she commended her son for his remarkable handling of the forest situation. Ray had been out of action for a whole week, and Scarlet was eager to bring her famished son some food. As she left the room, Ray collected his thoughts and glanced at the mysterious creature before him, the adorable draconic being. Once again, a magical prompt appeared, and Ray wondered if everyone had such creatures. The icon of the blessing of the dragon's eye caught his attention, prompting him to interact with it. A surge of fiery energy engulfed the room and settled in one of his eyes, transforming it into something beyond human. Ray regained the ability to see through walls, and he watched his mother busily preparing food in the kitchen. The system evaluated her condition, warning that she needed rest soon, as her energy levels were low. Ray was astonished by this regained ability, reminiscent of his time as the Red Dragon, where he possessed a myriad of magical powers. After failing the mage aptitude test, he had believed he'd never use such abilities again. But here they were, manifesting once more, and tears welled up in his eyes as he felt a profound sense of relief. However, it seemed he could only access one ability at a time. The mysterious prompt also revealed an intermediate-grade beast crystal, likely obtained after defeating the intermediate-grade demonic wolf. Suddenly, Ray sensed something was terribly wrong. Thick black smoke filled the air, accompanied by the acrid smell of burning. It became evident that a fire was raging in parts of their house. Despite her fatigue, Scarlet rushed to Ray's room, determined to get him out of harm's way. As the flames encroached upon their sanctuary, Scarlet shielded her son, conjuring a water spell to douse the blaze. Ray activated his blessing of the dragon's eye, fixing his gaze on the source of the fire, identifying it as the deranged woman, Bob and Kale's unhinged mother. She had attempted to burn down the house of a fire dragon and a water mage. Outside the Talon family house, villagers gathered, casting accusatory glances at the burning structure, whispering blame for the fire onto the supposed cursed child, as if he were responsible. Scarlet and Ray emerged from the inferno, determined and focused. Scarlet, still wearing her apron, cast a potent spell that miraculously extinguished the raging fire. She turned her attention to the villagers, who continued their malicious whispers and clung to the belief that the fire was caused by the curse. Scarlet moved toward her son, ensuring his well-being and soothing his fears. Ray, lost in thought, commended his mother for her swift action and composure amidst the chaos. Hand in hand, they returned to the safety of their home. Ray, however, was no longer willing to play the role of the obedient victim. He resolved to seek revenge against those who desired their demise, with the crazy lady at the top of his list. The following morning, the tragedy of the previous day seemed to have vanished. The Talon house stood unharmed, showing no signs of the fire. Ray returned to his routine, informing his mother that he would be heading out to train. Scarlet, in her motherly nature, advised caution and urged him not to overexert himself. Ray stood at the familiar bridge where the fateful events had unfolded. Clutching his trusty sword and carrying 2 wooden buckets, he faced the entrance to the magic forest. Drawing his blade, he activated his dragon's eye and fiery magic, granting him sight of the creatures lurking amidst the foliage. Only beginner magical beasts inhabited this region, posing no threat he couldn't handle. Beneath the towering trees in the comforting shade, a fledgling magical creature reached for a ripe, luscious fruit, unaware of the silent blade patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ray swiftly thrust his sword into the magical beast's body, using the dragon's eye to enhance his hunting skills. He gracefully descended to the ground, and the lifeless body of the beast tumbled from the towering trees. Surveying the scene below, it was evident that he had tirelessly hunted throughout the day, with numerous magical beast corpses scattered around. Gazing upon his impressive haul, he concluded that the 20 magical beasts he had hunted down would serve his purpose for visiting the forest. He had a substantial collection of beast crystals now, though it seemed their acquisition was mostly a matter of luck. Despite slaying 20 beginner magical beasts, he had only secured 2 crystals. As he pondered the significance of these crystals, an adorable draconic creature materialized, alerting him to the acquisition of a beginner-grade beast crystal. He had obtained another one, bringing his total to 3. He decided to feed one to a lone demonic wolf pup that emerged from the woods. To his surprise, the pup transformed into energy and entered his body, successfully taming it. He could now summon it at will. Curious about potential side effects, he sought answers from the little draconic creature, which assured him there were none. Another system alert revealed that he had unlocked the second ability out of 1,000 thanks to the successful taming. With pressing matters to attend to, Rei activated his dragon's eye and scoured the forest, finally discovering two familiar figures concealed within a mountainous area. With malevolent intent in his eyes, he walked into a dark cavern, where he found the remains of the siblings, Bob and Kale. In just a week, their flesh, blood, and organs had been devoured by the beasts of the magic forest. Rei entered the dark cavern, the final resting place of Bob and Kale. The skeletal remains of the siblings lay there, a grim reminder of their fate. Carefully, he removed their tattered clothes and placed them in one of the buckets. To his surprise, the other bucket was filled with a crimson-red substance. Leaving the remains behind, Rei exited the cavern, never looking back. It was the dead of night when he returned to the Talon house. His mother scolded him gently for staying out so late and pushing himself when he hadn't fully recovered. Rei responded like any other kid, and Scarlet began to worry about his rebellious streak. She informed him that his father, Jake, would be returning in a couple of days, and they could train together. Rei, now filled with excitement, couldn't wait to show his progress to his father. Scarlet, in her motherly mode, ordered him to put his blanket on properly, and he obediently complied. As the night grew deeper and the village quieted down, Rei sneaked out of the house and into the storage room where he kept his things. With buckets in hand, he embarked on a mission. His destination was Bob and Kale's house, where their deranged mother resided. In the darkness of the night, a persistent thumping and knocking sound echoed faintly. Holding a lantern, the lady was awoken from her sleep and ventured outside to investigate. She angrily called out to the person outside to stop knocking at such a late hour, but the noise persisted. With a glimmer of hope, she wondered if her sons, Bob and Kale, had finally come home. Opening the door, she called out for her sons, hoping they were nearby. In her yard, she found a tattered piece of clothing, confirming it as Kale's. Falling to her knees, she shivered at the sight. With renewed hope, she called out loudly, asking if Kale was nearby. She followed a trail of child-sized footprints, picking up a lantern and running deeper into the magic forest. As she approached the bridge leading into the forest's outskirts, she noticed the darkness around her. Even with a lantern in her hands, she knew it wasn't safe to go any further, but she couldn't help herself. Behind her, a red-haired figure watched from a perch in a tree. Suddenly, a noise startled her, and she quickly turned around to see where it came from. Beyond the bridge, the tattered clothes of her other son, Bob, hung from a tree branch, swaying in the wind. Rei quietly observed everything, following his plan. With his dragon's eye active, he saw countless small but savage magic beasts lurking in the darkness of the forest. The lady rushed deeper into the danger zone, pleading for her sons to stop running away and come home. As she screamed for her boys, Rei held a rope tied to a bucket of crimson substance above his target. With a snap, he released the rope, and the crimson substance splattered onto the lady. Panic filled her as she looked around to find her assailant. Rei jumped down and faced her, reverting to her contemptuous attitude. She pointed at him, blaming him for her misfortune. With his inhuman dragon's eye activated, she berated him, demanding he bring her children back. She charged forward but was halted by the hungry eyes of countless magic beasts surrounding her, drawn by the crimson substance. Rei watched as the lady who had tried to kill him and his mother was torn apart by the legion of magic beasts. The next day, the villagers whispered and gossiped with a more serious tone. The news had finally hit everyone, making them believe the curse was real. They transitioned from scorn to genuine fear of the Talon family after the lady's demise became public. Rei walked close to them, and the fear in their eyes was evident. They greeted him with good morning and praised his dedication to training in the early hours. The villagers had a change of heart now that they knew what Rei was capable of. Walking away from the relieved crowd, Rei couldn't help but notice that new rumors were circulating. With a faint smile, he thought the new status quo wasn't too bad. He liked it. As he approached the Talon household, several combat-worn horses caught his attention. The sight of these cavalry horses hinted at something significant. Excitement filled him as he opened the door, ready to greet his father. But what he found inside was an air of defeat and sadness. Armored soldiers looked crushed, and his mother knelt beside the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. Something had gone terribly wrong. Rei pushed past the armored troops and rushed to his mother's side, asking what had happened. In a shaky voice, she explained that his father was seriously ill. Ray approached his father, who was now emaciated and convulsing, a stark contrast to his usually lively self. Jake's condition was terrifying. Ray activated the blessing of the dragon's eye and observed his father's condition. His aura was unlike anything Ray had seen in any living being. Jake struggled to speak, repeatedly mentioning the shadows. An armored soldier explained that Jake had been infected with the plague of the shadows while trying to protect a villager from fearsome shadow beasts. Ray couldn't recall anything about these shadows or the plague. He wondered how this world had changed after he, the legendary Red Dragon, died. Starlet thanked the soldiers for bringing her husband home, and they apologized for their failure. Beside the bed, Ray focused on his system prompt, hoping to find a way to help his father recover. In his previous life as a legendary Red Dragon, he possessed powerful spells, including one to dispel curses and black magic. But unlocking that spell seemed impossible in his current weakened state. Turning to his mother, Ray asked if he could become stronger by joining the prestigious Avrian Knight Academy. Scarlet, tears in her eyes, reassured him that he would indeed become stronger, just like his father had at the same academy. Ray now had a newfound determination to excel as a warrior. Ray had made a firm decision. He vowed to his mother that he would ace the test and become a student at the esteemed Avrian Knight Academy, all to find a way to save his father. It was a remarkable transformation from his earlier desire to destroy humanity, now driven by the determination to save a single human life. Seeing her son embrace such a heady burden with youthful vigor, Scarlet couldn't help but hug him tightly, tears welling up. She expressed her unwavering belief that if anyone could succeed, it would be Ray. Her faith in her son was unwavering. Meanwhile, in a foreboding religious building, a massive dark crystal ball was surrounded by mysterious figures clad in black robes and hoods. They gazed at the images within the crystal ball, believing that a prophecy had been foretold, and the world was on the brink of great change. Their attention fixated on a young boy with vibrant red hair, pondering whether he would bring redemption or calamity to the world. The future remained uncertain, and their actions would be determined by the boy's impact. An elderly man in a dark hood ordered the congregation to inform the knights about the prophecy, urging them to find the red-haired boy as soon as possible. A mysterious figure addressed as the Master Elder declared that they would follow the boy if he brought redemption but would not hesitate to resort to destruction if he brought calamity. Back in the town, festive banners adorned the streets, and a joyous atmosphere permeated the air. The townspeople eagerly gathered, anticipating an event they'd been waiting for. Excitement filled the air as they patiently awaited the main event. Some had even lined up before dawn to secure a prime viewing spot. The parade commenced with armored knights in loudish carriages, igniting cheers and applause from the crowd. However, what the commoners truly yearned to see were the heavily armored men in front of the majestic green banner. Their arrival was met with adoration, and townsfolk couldn't help but swoon over the dashing Sir Delbert's looks. The center of town came into view, and the grand town square, in front of the massive town hall, awaited the procession. A solitary magic puppet occupied the square's center, surrounded by hopeful young candidates seeking entry to the Avrian Knight Academy. The crowd's cheers were hushed with a simple sword drop, signaling the beginning of the examination. One of the master knights, Winford, took the lead, welcoming everyone to the night examination. He introduced himself and his fellow knights, Sir Delbert and Sir Bernardo, who were acting as proctors. The assessment was open to children aged 5 and above, and the audience cheered in anticipation. Among the hopeful candidates, 2 familiar faces stood out. Ray concealed his vibrant red hair with a hood, determination gleaming in his eyes. Gary stood confidently at the front of the crowd, sporting an optimistic smile on his face. Winford, the knight overseeing the examination, announced that the sword puppet was ready and candidates could step forward as the first test officially commenced. It was evident that some strings had been pulled to secure one of these puppets for Ray. The town square buzzed with anticipation as a heavyset boy approached the sword puppet, clutching a wooden sword. He underestimated the puppet, thinking he could overpower it with sheer strength. With a swift strike, the puppet sent him flying into the air, failing the challenge in a mere second. His parents, initially enthusiastic, were left shocked and embarrassed by their son's defeat. Sir Bernardo promptly declared the failure and called the next candidate forward. Ray remembered his father's advice. He had to defeat a level 1 wooden puppet. Observing the puppet, Ray noted that it appeared immobile, but its defensive and counterattacking speed rivaled that of an adult. His heightened senses, thanks to the beast crystals he had acquired, allowed him to overhear the knight's whispered conversation. Delbert expressed disdain for testing commoners and suggested that knights should only come from noble blood. Even Winford found Delbert's sentiments excessive. The examinations had gone on for many rounds with no successful candidates. Just as Delbert voiced his impatience, the sound of a wooden sword hitting the ground signaled Gary's success. Sir Bernardo announced Gary's passing and the villagers cheered, claiming they knew all along that he was special. Gary acknowledged Ray with a thumbs up and a bright smile, making Ray blush with embarrassment. His actions had drawn the attention of the entire town square. Veteran knight Winford took an interest in Ray, while Delbert's expression soured upon seeing a red-haired child. Ray removed his hood, revealing his red hair, causing the crowd to erupt with malicious murmurs and whispers. He was labeled the infamous cursed child, believed to bring nothing but misfortune, even to his own father. The crowd protested that such a monster could never become a knight. Sir Bernardo instructed Ray to prepare as the next candidate, granting him a minute before the test would begin. Meanwhile, the disinterested Delbert approached, expressing his disbelief in prophecies, suggesting that if the prophecy were true, it would signify something significant. Ray confidently strode toward the sword puppet, catching Sir Bernardo's attention with a sinister look. From behind the puppet, he tampered with its settings, activating the level 3 trial. The puppet wasted no time, rushing toward Ray. Sir Winford and Bernardo sensed something was amiss with the puppet's configuration and shouted a warning. Despite the danger, Ray remained composed, gripping his wooden sword with unwavering confidence. The puppet's wooden feet echoed loudly as it charged, raising its sword for a powerful strike. The situation went from an elementary school test to a college-level challenge. Sir Winford, realizing the danger, drew his sword and shouted at Ray to get out of the way. A sharp swing filled the air, leaving everyone in shock, even Sir Bernardo and Sir Delbert. The audience, who had been criticizing Ray moments earlier, fell into silence alongside Gary. With a wooden thud, the puppet's head decapitated, landing on the ground as the level 3 puppet knelt before him. Sir Winford sheathed his sword and congratulated Ray, announcing his successful passage of the Avrian Knight Academy examination. Relieved, Ray left the town square and headed towards his proud mother and excited friend Gary. At the Talon household, Ray bid farewell to his bedridden father, promising to find a way to heal him despite his father's ghastly groans. Scarlet gave Ray a water drop pendant, a family heirloom, for good luck on his new journey. With determination in his heart, Ray left, assuring his worried mother that he was now a man and could handle himself. He walked away with a backpack and sword, each step taking him further from home. Scarlet watched him leave, shedding a tear as she said her farewell. At the city's outskirts, Ray approached the Avrian Knight Academy delegation, where Sir Winford welcomed him aboard. As he lifted the carriage's curtain, he was pleasantly surprised to find his village neighbor Gary already inside. Both boys blushed with embarrassment, realizing they were the only ones who had passed the examination. In the small carriage, Ray and Gary sat at opposite ends, the awkward atmosphere causing discomfort. Their future as a deadly duo seemed inevitable. As they journeyed on, the sun set, and the forest they passed through was bathed in the magical glow of dusk. Bizarre creatures and ancient trees bore witness to the Avrian Knight Academy's prestigious delegation. Attempting to break the ice and ease the tension, Gary cleared his throat and offered a sincere apology to Ray for his past actions and hurtful words. He bowed earnestly and regretfully, seeking forgiveness for his past foolishness. Ray, showing maturity beyond his years, forgave him, considering their past conflicts as the actions of clueless children. Gary then changed the subject, inquiring about Ray's sister, Emmy, whom he hadn't seen today. To his surprise, Gary learned that Emmy was attending the Roland Magic Academy herself, revealing her aptitude for magic. The forest remained silent, except for the sounds of hooves and armored troops marching. Suddenly, the vanguard of the caravan came to a halt, and the knights ordered everyone to stop. Gary and Ray sensed that something was amiss and peeked through the carriage curtain, discovering dense fog obscuring their view. Sir Winford, riding ahead, identified their group as Avrian Knight Academy Knights and demanded the unknown figure to reveal themselves. Through the dissipating fog, they spotted Anne Woodwork, an adventurer from the Traceless Guild, who urgently sought their help. She explained that her team had been attacked by shadow beasts, and she was the sole survivor. As she collapsed into Sir Bernardo's arms, he found it baffling that shadow beasts would appear when they hadn't encountered any other magic beasts during their journey. Sir Delbert arrogantly proposed that the shadow beasts might have avoided them, acknowledging their strength as knights. However, Sir Winford offered Anne safe passage to Rennie, where the knights were headed. This decision left Yuri confused as he believed they were heading to the Knight Academy. In response, Sir Delbert condescendingly chastised Yuri, claiming that sending a bunch of kids to the front line would be useless. Sir Winford patiently clarified that the Avrian Knight Academy was located at the border, making it vulnerable to attacks. The new recruits needed to train in Rennie for a decade, mastering the basics of battle before continuing their studies at the prestigious Knight Academy. The vital information about the 10-year training duration weighed heavily on Ray's mind. It was a short time for a dragon, but a long one for a human. His father's deteriorating condition added to his uncertainty, as he wondered if his dad could endure for such an extended period. Speedrun this training, brother, he thought, knowing the urgency of the situation. With the adventurers' needs addressed, the caravan continued its journey toward Rennie. The forest's misty ambience persisted, and Gary couldn't help but worry. He considered that the lone survivor, Anne Woodwork, had mentioned her party being attacked by shadow beasts, just as Ray's father had been. It left him anxious about the potential threat these creatures posed. As if in response to their concerns, a massive purple paw, belonging to a menacing creature, appeared directly in their path. Ray sensed the impending danger, prompting Sir Winford to issue orders for readiness. The caravan faced a monstrous purple bear with a malicious aura, accompanied by a pack of equally sinister-looking creatures. The bear, known as Mama Bear, locked eyes with the caravan, emanating a threatening presence. It let out a haunting groan as its intentions became clear. Sir Bernardo identified it as the Drop Bear King, and it had become a shadow beast. With the Drop Bear King's roar, chaos erupted as the pack of drop bears charged. Delbert, once arrogant, gripped his sword with newfound focus, while knights throughout the caravan prepared for battle. Trouble wasn't confined to the front. It began to brew everywhere as drop bears emerged from the greenery. Unnoticed by the armored troops, sneaky drop bears closed in from behind. Sir Bernardo found himself in a perilous situation, but Ray swiftly intervened, saving him from harm. Ray's heroic actions drew praise from the knights, and he stood alongside Gary with their blades ready, prioritizing their own protection. At the forefront, knights effectively dispatched the initial wave of drop bears, cleaving through any beast that dared enter their zone. However, the Drop Bear King remained motionless, as if awaiting something. Meanwhile, Gary faced a challenge against the massive drop bears due to his small stature. As two clever beasts encircled him, they managed a sneak attack from behind. Ray, once again, leaped to the rescue, striking down the shadow beast and saving Gary from certain harm. Ray found himself covered in drops of blood and grime, a reminder to remain cautious in this combat. He chuckled at Gary, who was strategically waiting to swoop in for kills. "He's chilling on the sidelines, waiting to steal kills," Ray remarked, showing his appreciation for Gary's tactical approach. These drop bears proved to be a formidable challenge, far stronger than the demonic wolves they had faced earlier. When the Drop Bear King finally acted, it unleashed a resounding roar that generated a powerful shockwave. The force at it sent armored troops flying, while knights stood firm. Ray, assessing the situation, realized that this creature was on a different level of strength. The menacing look in the creature's eyes and the blood on its maw made it clear that this was a formidable adversary. With a deliberate gesture, the Drop Bear King raised its massive paw and pointed forward, a gesture that instilled a sense of impending doom in anyone it targeted. The veteran knights noticed the oddity as the monstrous creature remained stationary, not attacking or engaging. As they continued to battle countless drop bears, they couldn't decipher the beast's intentions. To their surprise, a shadow beast started speaking fluently in a sinister human tongue, declaring the shadow's dominance and impending takeover of the continent. Ray couldn't help but think the shadow beast was like a salty, trash-talking gamer. The knights and soldiers were bewildered by this unexpected development, unsure if it was merely a threat. After delivering its chilling speech, the Drop Bear King mustered strength, leaping high into the air and leaving an impact crater as it vanished. Sir Winford breathed a sigh of relief, thankful that the monstrous shadow beast chose not to engage in combat. He commended the children for their composed reactions, foreseeing their potential as outstanding knights. Ray, however, was intrigued by the beast's earlier words, oblivious to the fact that he had acquired another beast crystal. The veteran knight, recognizing Ray's unusual reaction, felt the boy was remarkably composed for his age. Meanwhile, the arrogant Sir Delbert observed Ray with a dark expression, not bothering to conceal his disdain. Time passed, and the journey continued without further incidents. Finally, on a bright sunny day, the caravan of knights and carriages reached Rennie town. They were greeted by a larger-than-usual number of guards stationed at the entrance. When questioned about the increased security, they learned of an Amber Alert issued by the Allure Kingdom, heightening security across all towns and cities. Representatives from Rennie Town's troops warmly welcomed the esteemed knights and escorted them through the massive town gate. Anne Woodwork expressed her gratitude, thankful for their protection. The news of the Amber Alert weighed heavily on the knights and their young charges. While Gary was full of energy and enthusiasm, Ray remained calm, his thoughts occupied by more pressing concerns. Sir Winford couldn't help but contemplate the impending crisis that seemed to be looming over the continent. He wondered if Ray might be the child of prophecy destined to save them all. In Ray's mind, he reaffirmed his promise to his ailing father and looked up at the buildings of Rennie Town, knowing that his journey had only just begun. He hoped his father could hold on a little longer. A decade passed in the renowned Rennie Town, bringing significant changes. Gary, now a teenager, sat in a classroom where the instructor asked a simple question about the knight's abilities. Gary confidently answered that knights possessed the ability called Che, which enhanced their bodies and senses, sometimes pushing them beyond human limits temporarily. The instructor was impressed with Gary's knowledge. When asked why Chi could only be practiced after the age of 15, Gary covered for Ray, claiming he was in the restroom. Sylvia, a striking girl, offered a precise answer, explaining that practicing Chi put a significant strain on the body, and it was best to start after the age of 15 to minimize potential harm. As the lecture continued, the instructor expressed hope that the students would carry what they learned with them into their future journeys outside of Rennie Town. Beyond the town, the lush forest and pristine waterfalls provided a picturesque backdrop. In the woods, a massive boar beast confronted a magic wolf named Nora. A deep voice, belonging to a familiar figure, commanded Nora to attack the boar. Without hesitation, Nora lunged, swiftly defeating the boar with a single strike. From a distance, a figure with familiar red hair observed the battle and obtained another beginner-grade beast crystal. The system initiated the absorption process, and the boy praised Nora, who eagerly returned to its human form and merged with him. Aware that he was running late, the boy prepared to return to town, but was interrupted by the sound of approaching cavalry hooves. The glorious banner of Avery and Meg Academy appeared, signaling the arrival of something significant. Approaching them was none other than the veteran knight, Sir Winford, riding atop his stallion. He was surprised to find the red-haired teenager, Ray, the first person he encountered upon his return to Rennie Town. Sir Winford praised Ray for slipping past the heavy town guards with a sly grin. Ray had indeed grown taller since their last meeting, while the ageless veteran knight hadn't changed a bit. Ray's escapades outside the town were well known. He often slipped away to hunt magical beasts on his own. Today he had quite a successful hunt, thanks to the recent cancellation of the Amber Alert. Sir Winford reminded Ray of his luck, cautioning that he shouldn't have ventured any further, as the outer guards wouldn't hesitate to take action. The veteran knight had some important news to deliver. He had visited Ray's house in the village and discovered that Ray's father's condition hadn't worsened. Scarlet had been taking good care of him and had a message for her son, not to worry too much about them. Despite his polite smile, Ray's downcast eyes revealed his true emotions. He had dedicated the past decade to rigorous training, pushing his physical limits day in and day out. However, he hadn't unlocked any new abilities despite his relentless efforts. He was at a loss for what to do next. Sensing Ray's heady burden, Sir Winford offered encouragement, firmly tapping the young man on the shoulder and urging him to buck up. Tomorrow marked the day when Ray and the other rookies from Rennie Town would head to Avrian, and he needed to be prepared. As they walked together, Sir Winford looked forward to seeing the other young recruits. Back at the entrance to Rennie Town, a loud commotion erupted at the barracks. A man with dark glasses was angrily questioning the armored guards about Ray. He insisted that Ray was special and needed to be monitored closely. The frustrated man was Alan, who casually greeted Sir Winford, but quickly reverted to anger upon seeing Ray. He complained about Ray's repeated escapes and how many times he had warned him not to leave his sight. Ray had been playing hooky so often that they'd lost count in the past month. Alan couldn't wait for Ray to leave so he could finally be free from his babysitting duties. However, as long as Ray was his student, the responsibility still fell on him. Alan was adamant about not letting Ray skip class, and Sir Winford found himself caught in the middle of this comical situation. After a few moments in the beautiful Rennie Town Square, the impeccable weather, and a thundering announcement, all the students were summoned to an emergency meeting. Ray, nursing a bump on his head from Alan's lesson, casually maneuvered through the crowd to find Gary. Sylvia, the cold and beautiful girl, blushed as she tried to steal a glance at Ray. the majestic scroll rustling could be heard throughout the town square. The person on the stage introduced himself as Squire Lancey, here to announce that tomorrow they would be heading to the Avrian Knight Academy. The journey would take about 7 days, and he sternly warned everyone to follow his orders to avoid trouble. The students unanimously assured him that they understood. An armored soldier asked Sir Winford about the chosen path, and the veteran knight confidently replied that they would go through the swamp. This alarmed the soldier, who thought it was too challenging for the children at this stage. However, Sir Winford believed that facing challenges was essential for these future knights, and they weren't the only ones being tested. Other red-haired children were present, including an identical twin with the same distinctive hair color as Rey. The plot thickened as it became apparent that Rey was not the only red-haired child marked by those who believed in the prophecy. The next day, as the sun rose, the carriages and the entire caravan prepared to depart from the entrance of Rennie Town. Inside one of the carriages, Rey was catching up on sleep and drooling on himself. A red-haired boy named Kyle, with a shaved head, questioned why they hadn't used a teleportation device for convenience, which could have saved them a lot of time. A dark-haired boy named Dan mocked the group for their lack of knowledge, explaining that there were no teleportation devices at the Avrian Knight Academy. Kyle argued that they should have one to rival the Roland Magic Academy. Another voice joined the discussion, a serene voice that poked fun at them for not paying attention in class. Sylvia, with a book in her hand, mentioned that the Academy's location on the border required them to defend against foreign invaders and shadow beasts. Setting up a teleportation device would pose a security risk if the Academy were ever defeated. As they journeyed for a few hours with the sun about to set, they decided to rest near some ruined castle. Upon arrival, the students were ordered to disembark and prepare for camping, with each student pairing up and helping one another. They set up their tents for the night, and Gary quietly pointed out to Rey that Sylvia had been constantly looking at him. Rey shrugged it off, thinking there was nothing special about him, but when they both turned to look at Sylvia, she blushed profusely. Her embarrassment was evident when she messed up setting up her tent. Gary found this amusing, suggesting that Sylvia had been staring at Rey because of his unique red hair. However, Rey thought that his hair was the only reason, oblivious to any romantic interest. Gary reminded Rey that he wasn't the only red-haired kid around anymore. There were the twins, Sloth and Badger, with polar opposite personalities, as well as Ian, a hard-working and kind-hearted gentle giant. Kyle, always upbeat and loud, added to the group's diversity. Rey admitted that Gary had a point about Sylvia's stares, but maintained that he had no interest in her. Even Gary's teasing couldn't sway him. Meanwhile, behind the castle walls of the ruins, Dan, the overconfident kid from the carriage, was seen sneaking away with someone named Monk. Monk was uncertain about their sneaky excursion, and as they ventured further, they were greeted by an unbearable stench worse than dead rats. A nasty smoke obscured their vision, and they found themselves in a sticky swamp. Suddenly, Squire Lancey appeared, clearly furious, and warned them about the sharp worms that could bite off their legs if they fell asleep. Frightened, Dan and Monk hurried back to camp. With the sun completely set, the campsite was quiet except for the crackling of the fire. An armored guard stood atop the ruined castle wall, keeping an eye out for any abnormalities. Below, Rey was silently sneaking away, confident that he could evade the guards in this area. Sharp bugs, ferocious creatures with swift attacks and disgusting slime, attacked, and pink-haired girl struggled as she was frightened by the blood of the bugs. Gary bravely stepped in to save her, slicing down some of the bugs. While she was training to become a knight, the swarm of bugs still frightened her. Gary led the trainees to disembark from the cart and maintain vigilance. Among them, Gary, Rey, Sylvia, Dan, and the other red-haired Kyle quickly composed themselves to face the swarm. Gary organized them into groups of 3 to strengthen their defenses. Energetic Kyle enthusiastically charged into battle, challenging others to see who could kill the most sharp bugs. Rey secretly activated his dragon's eye, curious about why the trainees were so excited. They effectively collaborated in groups, mowing down the swarm, and some of them killed tens of these beginner-rank magical beasts. However, Rey wasn't particularly impressed, as these creatures were not a significant threat. Up on the cliffs, 6 knights who had left the group earlier quietly observed the battlefield. Rey, having realized that these were weak beasts, decided to return to the carriage out of boredom, much to Dan's annoyance. The knights, observing from afar, evaluated Rey's performance, suggesting that he could achieve something known as a red belt. Contrary to Rey, Gary received praise for his decisive attacks and body control. The knights believed he would earn a white belt for his performance. Sylvia had also caught their eye, demonstrating perfect stance and a keen mind. Her deadly blade dispatched sharp bugs with masterful precision, a single counter-slash ending each encounter. Everything was going well for the trainees until something emerged from the ground, causing a menacing rumble. It was a beast resembling the sharp bugs but more monstrous, formed from their merging. This unexpected foe shattered the trainees' confidence. However, a few of them stepped up, including the physically strong Ian, who ripped through the giant sharp bug to protect his comrades. The twins showcased their blade skills, clearly standing out. Kyle continued slaughtering bugs efficiently and gleefully. It appeared the knights didn't need to intervene. The red-haired kids displayed their unique strengths. Unfortunately, Ray stood out for not helping, lost in his post-battle stretch after a peaceful nap in the carriage. The identity of the child of prophecy remained a mystery. Kyle boasted about killing the most sharp bugs, hinting that they might earn a white belt based on their performance. Gary was puzzled by this white belt reference. Meanwhile, Ray continued his beauty sleep. It turned out that even after becoming a knight, individuals would be ranked differently. The highest-ranking knights in this trip, the white tassel protectors, or coveted white belts, indicating their recognized skills. There were also green and black belts symbolizing different skills and specialties. Red belts, the lowest-ranked knight aspirants, received basic training and minimal attention, often considered a lost cause. Ray realized that with a red belt, he could do as he pleased, including hunting magic beasts for their crystals and abilities. The sight of the prestigious Avery Knight Academy walls, adorned with glorious banners, marked their arrival. The gates appeared colossal to the trainees, an overwhelming view as they approached their destination, the renowned Avery Knight Academy. The Great Walls was massive, making it more like a city than an academy. It was powered by monocrystals, illuminating every corner without the need for torches. The sheer luxury and prestige were worlds apart from the small village Gary and Ray had grown up in. Sir Lancey reminded them to stay close for the tour to avoid getting lost, assuring them they'd have time to explore later. Their first stop was the armory, where the staff treated Sir Lancey with utmost respect. Next was the library, where silence was expected. Sir Lancey seemed to be popular among the lady knights, and even the librarians were knights themselves. Graduates of the academy had to volunteer in the city for 2 years before deciding whether to stay or leave. Their last stop was one of the most significant spots in the academy, a cemetery. 2 imposing stones marked it, but Ray's attention was drawn to something else, the remains of knights who had fought and died for the Ellyr Kingdom. Sir Lancey's speech moved the trainees, emphasizing the knights' duty to protect their home. Everyone responded affirmatively except for Ray, whose rage simmered at the thought of humans using dragon bodies for their armor and weapons. Sylvia asked about the sculptures representing the founders of the academy, the legendary Dragon Knights. When Ray inquired about Dragon Knights, Sir Lancey dismissed the question, expecting the trainees to learn it through history lessons. This only fueled Ray's anger, triggering his uncontrollable dragon's eye, revealing something peculiar beneath one of the tombstones. After the tour ended, Gary and Ray found themselves assigned to the same dorm. Gary was excited about this new chapter, but Ray remained lost in thought about what he had seen earlier. As they contemplated the mysterious presence beneath the tombstone, Sylvia, surprisingly, was assigned to their room. Gary explained that the academy treated everyone equally, but Sylvia wasn't thrilled and stormed off to request a room change. Their other roommates arrived, including Monk, the gentle giant Ian, and 2 more, Dan and Marcia. Ray eyed Ian, his fellow red-haired companion, as they prepared for the beginning of their academy life. The name Woodward triggered a familiar feeling in Ray, but he couldn't quite place it. Sylvia, still fuming from the room assignment, returned to the dorm in a sour mood. She reluctantly took her bag back, warning the boys not to enter while she changed. Despite Gary's expectations, the administration denied her request to change dorms. Dan, their final roommate, entered with open arms from Gary. They quickly tricked Dan into dealing with a non-existent cockroach, setting the stage for a prank. The moment Dan burst into the room, he was greeted by a shocking sight. A scream and a sensation of horror echoed through the halls as the prank unfolded, leaving everyone in stitches. Lunchtime arrived, and the massive dining hall was bustling with activity. Dan worried about Sylvia, fearing her revenge, but Gary and Ray were too focused on devouring their meals. They discussed Sylvia as if she wasn't present, much to her chagrin. She couldn't believe her roommate's carelessness, especially with the upcoming Meg Belt test. 2 smug training knights approached their table, taunting them for their eating habits and rural origins. They made fun of Ian's size and mocked the red-haired trio from Rennie. However, when they insulted Kyle and Monk, the situation escalated. Monk stood up for Ian, drawing the bully's attention. They taunted him until he snapped back. The bullies then targeted Ian, telling him to take a longer route in the future. Kyle, the cheerful one of the red-haired twins, paused his lunch while the other twin remained calm. The bullies' insults continued until Monk decided to confront them, earning their mockery. Suddenly, a chicken leg soared through the air, hitting one of the bullies in the face. Enraged, he demanded the culprit reveal themselves. Ray emerged and swiftly subdued the bully, twisting his arm in a lock. When the bully insulted Ray, calling him a disgusting red-haired monster, a nosy trainee reported the incident to the officials. Sir Lancey, with a stern expression, tried to prevent the situation from escalating further. Ray, however, paid no heed and continued to confront the bully. As the bully cried out for help from the knights, Ray wanted to teach him a lesson about treating others poorly. Sir Lancey intervened, officially ordering Ray to release the bully. Ray knew that sometimes force was necessary to make people understand the consequences of their actions. The other trainees watched the scene unfold in horror, and Ray remained resolute in his decision. Ray's actions earned him the ire of Sir Lancey for disregarding explicit orders. Ray claimed to have hearing problems, a statement that mirrored Lancey's selective hearing, adding emotional damage as an excuse. He resumed eating with Gary, undeterred by the bully's presence, unwilling to let them ruin his appetite. Whispers of admiration circulated around him, further infuriating Sir Lancey, who now had his sights set on Ray. The arrival of 3 commanders marked the beginning of the test, and whispers about its significance filled the air. Sir Winford silenced the chatter, welcoming the 6 elders who appeared masked and imposing. Their presence indicated the gravity of the test, an unprecedented occurrence in the Academy's history. Ray, using his dragon's eye, sensed their immense strength, reminiscent of the creature that had ended his previous life. These elders seemed capable of challenging even dragons. The test involved assigning different colored belts based on the results. A red belt meant failure, but Sir Winford aimed to challenge this stigma, urging trainees not to give up on themselves. Ray wondered how Sir Winford would react when he eventually received a red belt. The examination consisted of 5 stages, testing various aspects of a knight's abilities. The first stage required pushing a massive boulder called the Stone of Power. The following stages included facing the roaring flames of the blazing inferno, stealthily navigating an undetected passage, demonstrating accuracy and precision, and measuring a knight's values in the pursuit of truth. The first stage, the Stone of Power Challenge, took place in a grand coliseum adorned with magic stones. The rules were simple: push the boulder to the goal position. Participants had 2 chances, and if they failed on the first attempt, they could use a pair of magic gloves on the second try, although this would affect their evaluation. Ray had already noticed that someone didn't want him to succeed. Sir Lancey, the proctor of the test, announced his formal rejection of Ray Talon's participation, citing his disobedience to superiors' orders. Ray's friends protested this decision, but Lancey intended to use it as a warning for all training knights. He emphasized the importance of following orders from superiors above all else and encouraged anyone who objected to report him to his superiors. The first test began, with Sir Lancey's targeting of Ray evident. Sylvia contemplated appealing to the higher-ups, but Ray preferred to proceed without doing so. He believed it would be simpler to join the others in the next stage, already resigned to receiving the lowest red belt. Sylvia remained genuinely concerned for Ray. Gary managed to pass the first trial, gritting his teeth along the way. Sylvia succeeded on her second attempt, thanks to the magic gloves, while Ian effortlessly lifted the massive boulder, demonstrating his physical strength. Ray congratulated Gary on passing, but he knew the second stage would be a tough challenge for himself. He observed the elderly proctor, who appeared to be from the Roland Magic Academy. Despite Ray's assumption that physically strong individuals typically had weaker magic resistance, the Academy aimed to assess their strengths and weaknesses through these 5 tests. Gary was the first to face the second stage, the Blazing Inferno. Under the proctor's spell, he endured for 57 seconds, earning praise from Ray, although Gary wished he could have lasted a full minute. Next was Sylvia, who maintained her mental clarity and lasted an impressive 5 minutes, making her the talk of the trainees. Ray, up next, received Sylvia's quick good luck before entering the test. He expected to last about 20 seconds, but thought giving up immediately might be a better bet. However, Ray was surprised when he faced an image of a fearsome red dragon, an image from his past life. It enveloped him in blazing flames. Ray couldn't understand why he was facing his past self. The trial took an unexpected turn as both Rei and the proctor were sent flying in opposite directions, shocking everyone in attendance. The proctor began screaming that Rei was cursed, a cursed one by the red dragon. These words cast a negative shadow over Rei in the eyes of his fellow trainees. Sir Winfrey assured Rei that the old man would recover and advised him to rest as well. However, the situation was strange, as this established mage's mana had been entirely drained by a test of this degree. After Sir Winfrey left, an elder quietly ordered an armored knight to take action. The armored knight, complete with a mask reminiscent of COVID-19 precautions, was intrigued by Rei talent. The boys were unaware of what a mana disorder was, and Sylvia had to explain that it typically affected mages. Mages who drained their mana but forcefully cast magic always faced difficulties. Rei attributed his unlucky streak to being a genius, acknowledging that geniuses often faced hardships. Sylvia, too, found it strange, as someone from Roland should not make such an elementary mistake. The notion of a curse hung in the air, further complicating matters. Despite the intrigue, they chose to focus on hanging out together. Suddenly, the ground started shaking vigorously, accompanied by rumbling sounds echoing throughout the Colosseum. Massive tree trunks emerged from the ground, conjured by a powerful hooded mage. It was an impressive display of magic, covering the entire testing area with a massive forest. Inside this enchanted forest, the trainees were bewildered by the sudden turn of events. A hooded and masked figure introduced themselves as the proctor of the third stage. Their task: follow him and replicate his movements in the undetected passage, the third trial. Without a moment to process the situation, the proctor swiftly vanished, signaling the start of the third test. It all felt reminiscent of something out of Naruto. Monk was the quickest to react, leaping into the trees, closely followed by Rei, Gary, and Sylvia. They were eager to demonstrate their speed within the forest's familiarity. Sylvia's prowess was notable, leaving only Dan behind. The proctor, initially considering slowing down, was surprised when he noticed Monk leading the way, with the others not far behind. Realizing they could keep up, the proctor taunted them to catch up, urging them to match his pace. As they continued, they encountered a peculiar sight: 5 arrows loaded onto a single bough, lying in wait. Rei sensed the incoming danger and warned those ahead. Thanks to his alert, they managed to avoid the traps set by a woman wielding the bow. This woman, who had passed the first part of the exam proctored by the masked man, urged the trainees not to stand idly by and lose to him. She blended into the forest, signaling the start of their next test. It seemed they would simultaneously undergo the third and fourth stages, testing their accuracy with a bow. Targets awaited them in the forest ahead, and they needed to hit 3 to pass the test. However, they had to do so while contending with the interference of the fourth proctor, part of the Eye of Precision test. Rei, still aiming for a red belt, activated his dragon's eye to demonstrate his abilities. With his enhanced vision, he noticed a special arrow hurtling through the air with deadly intent, directly aimed at Gary. In a sudden burst of action, Rei instinctively shoved his friend Gary aside, shouting a warning. His quick thinking moved Gary out of harm's way, but Rei soon realized he was in the direct path of an oncoming attack. Miraculously, the trajectory of the incoming threat was altered by another arrow, fired from a different direction. This new arrow, powerful and unyielding, embedded itself deeply into a nearby tree. Clearly, this was no ordinary training exercise. The force behind the arrow was too intense. Their unexpected rescuer, a young lady adept in archery, approached them swiftly, her bow in hand. Despite her impressive skills, she remained humble when complimented. Before they could engage in further conversation, a new volley of arrows rained down upon them. Rei and Gary began to adapt, nimbly dodging the arrows. Yet something fell amiss. These arrows were different. They were wrapped in chi energy, unlike the standard ones used by the training proctor. It seemed someone was not just testing them, but potentially aiming to harm them, or more specifically, to harm Rei. From a hidden spot in the woods, the sound of another arrow being drawn caught their attention. This time, it wasn't the proctor. Rei and the young lady were the only ones who heard this ominous sound. Armed with this knowledge, Rei readied his bow, pulling back on an arrow with such force that his wooden bow began to crack, eventually snapping under the strain of his immense power. His overzealous attempt at a counterattack rendered his bow useless. Observing this, the proctor took action, launching a chi-infused arrow of her own. However, the mysterious figure in the woods effortlessly evaded it. The proctor investigated, but found no trace of the intruder, a feat that seemed almost impossible. She casually attributed her stray shot to an accident, not wanting to alarm the trainees, but Rei knew better. He sensed the proctor was hiding something, perhaps to protect them, or for reasons unknown. The test concluded shortly after, with the trainees, including Sylvia, showing satisfactory results. When Sylvia learned of the danger Ray and Gary had faced, she was adamant about reporting it to the Knights, but Ray preferred to keep it quiet. Gary agreed. The proctor's secrecy hinted at a deeper mystery. The assailant, skilled enough to infiltrate the test undetected, had to be someone with intimate knowledge of the event, possibly a proctor or a connected knight. Ray's suspicions fell on Lancey, a character he distrusted. Despite the urge to act, Ray decided to wait and watch, curious about the identity of their adversary. They traced the intruder's path to the edge of the conjured forest, leading to an exit of the Colosseum. There, the fourth proctor confronted the assailant, a man with a distinctive scar on his eye. She demanded to know why he targeted her students. In close range, she was ready to strike him down if necessary. The intruder, left with no choice, prepared to face her with his blade, which glowed with a scarlet crystal under the dark skies. This marked the beginning of the final stage of the examination, involving a sword crafted from an Ultra Beast crystal from a firebird, known to emit flames. The trainees, unversed in such advanced techniques, now faced the challenge of testing their willpower and key manipulation against the formidable Sir Delbert and the Sword of Truth. The trainees at the academy, still unfamiliar with chi manipulation, faced the daunting task of controlling the Firebird's Ultra Beast crystal sword using only their willpower. Sir Delbert, overseeing the test, called Ian to step forward first. Nervously gripping the sword, Ian was caught off guard when it erupted into a large flame, a display that surprised even Sir Delbert. Although the flame was impressive, Ian struggled to control it. Meanwhile, in another part of the academy, a character named Elder Gibby received a report from the assailant who had caused trouble in the woods. Unperturbed by the negative news, Elder Gibby donned a golden mask, transforming his appearance instantly. This act of interference in the exam sent a clear message to their followers. The Pureblood Guild was still active and influential. Back at the final test, it was Gary's turn. He successfully summoned a strong and impressive flame from the sword. After his attempt, he high-fived Ray, who was next, and wished him luck. Sylvia approached Gary, curious about Ray's true strength. Gary, knowing Ray closely, affirmed his exceptional abilities, citing an incident from 10 years ago when Ray single-handedly defeated an intermediate-ranked demonic wolf, saving Gary's life. While Ray's father dismissed this tale as an exaggeration, Sylvia was intrigued, wondering why Ray would conceal his true power. When Ray's turn came, his unique draconic avatar appeared as he touched the sword's hilt. Presented with the option to absorb the ultra-grade beast crystal, Ray seemingly chose to do so as the crystal lost its scarlet glow. Feigning ignorance, he swung the now flameless sword, baffling Sir Delbert. The knights, realizing what had happened, pushed Ray away and inspected the sword, now devoid of its power. Despite accusations, Ray maintained his clueless demeanor, even joking about the intense scrutiny he was under. As tensions rose, an armored knight rushed to the stage with urgent news for Sir Delbert. Whatever the report contained visibly disturbed Sir Delbert, prompting him to abruptly end the tests and instruct the trainees to return to their rooms. At dinner, the trainees were to receive their belts, but Ray seemed unfazed by the events. He overheard the knight's report to Sir Delbert. The proctor of the fourth test had been found dead, her body still warm, suggesting the murder was recent. The academy's leadership convened urgently to discuss the proctor's death, suspecting it might be an internal matter involving either the pureblood or dark guilds. This development called for a thorough investigation into the death of the captain of the green-belted knights. In the midst of uncertainty about their next steps, the elders, unable to reach a consensus, seek guidance from the head elder. The head elder's plan is clear: keep the incident contained within the academy while the knight captains investigate. The time for the highly anticipated omen of ranks is drawing near, stirring excitement and anxiety among the trainees, all curious about the color of their belts. A surprising revelation emerges. Their fellow Lady Dormmate, known for her skilled archery, is Martha Woodwork, daughter of Anne Woodwork Ray. Meanwhile, Ray, still troubled by the recent death of the fourth proctor within the academy, struggles to focus. This alarming event suggests that the perpetrator could be an elder or a commander, a thought that lingers in Ray's mind. Gary, observing Ray's frequent daydreaming, reflects on their past adventure on the way to Rennie, where they had saved Martha's mother. As the time for the belt ceremony approaches, every trainee, including Sylvia, who had noticed Ray's involvement in several unusual incidents, gathers in the large hall, filled with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The Knight Commander's arrival heightens the tension. First to be called for his belt is Gary, whose exceptional performance has earned him widespread admiration among his peers. Despite expectations of receiving the highest rank, Gary is unexpectedly awarded a black belt, much to his surprise. Sir Winford, presenting the belt with a smile, leaves Gary visibly disappointed, having hoped for a higher accolade. Following Gary, Ian is awarded a white belt, recognized for his immense strength and kind nature. Sylvia, deemed the goddess of their batch, also receives a white belt. In contrast, Dan is given a red belt, the lowest rank, while Martha is assigned to the green belts. Even Monk is surprised to receive a black belt. All eyes turn to Ray as he strides onto the stage. Despite his lackluster performance, the Knights award him a black belt, further deepening Dan's despair as the sole red belt holder in their dorm. Ray himself is baffled by this decision, suspecting a hidden agenda behind it. With the belt distribution complete, the trainees prepare for the next day's training, each according to their belt rank. Amidst the confusion over the black belt's role, a man with a distinctive scar is spotted nearby. He scrutinizes his chart, which lists all black belt holders, including redheads Kyle and Ray, hoping they won't cause trouble in their future roles as Dragon Knights. The following day at the training grounds, the new black belt inductees, Ray, Kyle, Gary, and Monk, await their instructor with growing impatience. When he finally arrives, they find themselves following a chain-smoking, scar-faced, carefree individual. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Kyle, unable to hold back his curiosity, inquires about the instructor's name. In response, the instructor, nonchalant and laid back, dismisses their query with a casual wave. Kay introduces himself simply as Kay as they make their way to the training ground. On their route, they unexpectedly encounter the despised Sir Delbert. Delbert, disdainful, expresses his regret that Kay has to deal with two red-haired trainees in his group. He singles out Ray, stating he wouldn't have allowed him in the academy if the choice were his. Ray, undeterred, retorts sharply, "Ang, Gurung Delbert, who threatens to keep a watchful eye on him." Kay intervenes, stating firmly that Ray Talon is now a part of the Black-Belted Knights, emphasizing the importance of unity and dismissing any discrimination. Despite Delbert's continued verbal jabs at Ray, whom he considers a bane, Kay declares his staunch support for the Black Belt Dragon Knights. Delbert, frustrated, retreats to his private quarters, still muttering about a prophecy the trainees are unfamiliar with, causing Kay to foresee complications. Arriving at the training site, they are greeted by an ominous, intense wind at the entrance, making it hard to even open their eyes. As their vision adjusts to the dim interior, they notice the place's state of disrepair, with thick dust and cobwebs everywhere. As they step inside, Kay vanishes without a trace, adding to their unease. The massive gates slam shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. Ray tries using his dragon's eye to locate Kay, but finds no trace of him, indicating their instructor's exceptional stealth. Suddenly, Kay reappears, startling them with his menacing presence. He announces that their training will take place in complete darkness, aiming to enhance their abilities and hone their senses until darkness becomes their most potent weapon. Gary, concerned, inquires if it's true that black-belted knights are trained for assassination missions. Kay confirms their suitability for such missions due to their unique skills, but reassures Gary that he can choose to fight honorably if he wishes. Kay then distributes black straps with screens to each trainee. The screen displays information like rankings and training completion rates. Ray, currently ranked 300th, is at the bottom, while Gary, the top-ranked trainee, is the subject of much speculation. Dan boasts about being dorm mates with Sylvia and Martha, ranked 3rd and 89th, respectively. Monk, content with his ranking of 65th, observes his position on the screen. Kay explains that the rankings are updated daily and that trainees can challenge and potentially replace those ranked higher, offering opportunities for advancement and additional resources. The competitive nature of the ranking system is evident, with each trainee determined to improve their standing in the academy. 10 days after his solo excursions, Ray returns, almost reaching his goal of 100 points for beginner beast crystals. Upon entering their room, he's met with a heated argument between Monk and Gary. Gary, disparaging the special black belt training, asserts his ability to maintain his top rank without it. This is the first time they've witnessed Monk, usually calm, so visibly upset. Dan, unaware of the black belt's training methods, is baffled by the argument. Gary, not particularly skilled in stealth and assassination, contrasts with Monk, who excels in these areas. However, Gary still surpasses Monk in basic skills and overall strength, despite Monk's rapid progress. Monk is frustrated with Gary's continuous dismissal of his efforts. Sylvia steps in to defuse the situation and seeks Ray's assistance. To resolve the conflict, Ray proposes that they settle it through a fight, an idea that Dan enthusiastically supports. Monk accepts the challenge for a rank battle, and word of the fight between the top-ranked Gary and the up-and-coming Monk spreads throughout the academy. Even Sebastian, the youngest son of Delbert, hears about it and derisively refers to it as a clash of country bumpkins from Rennie. Kyle seizes the opportunity to organize bets on the fight, with Dan placing his bet on Gary. Martha, more lightheartedly, bets on Monk. Sylvia queries Ray about Monk's chances, while Kyle takes on the roles of both bookie and referee. Ray believes Gary holds the advantage. As the match begins, Monk charges with ferocity, while Gary, known for his exceptional technique, stands as a distinguished figure among the students. Their duel intensifies, with Monk executing a powerful downward strike, engulfing the arena in smoke. The audience watches eagerly as the smoke clears, revealing that Gary has successfully blocked Monk's attack. Gary advises Monk to concede, seeing little chance for him to win. Despite Monk's significant improvement, Ray and Sylvia believe Gary will prevail due to the gap in their abilities. Monk's frustration grows with each blocked strike, giving Gary an opportunity to counterattack. In a swift move, Gary breaks Monk's wooden sword, indicating a clear defeat in a real battle. The arena falls silent. However, Monk refuses to accept the outcome. Ray, perceptive of a change in the atmosphere, notices Monk surrounded by a strange force wielding the remains of his splintered sword. As Monk targets Gary from behind, their roommates shout warnings from the stands. The broken blade comes dangerously close to Gary's neck, emitting an ominous aura. It's evident that Monk has lost his composure, leading to a tense and unexpected turn in the duel. In a swift reaction, Ray intercepts the splintered blade's attack with his bare hands, resulting in bloodshed. The audience is stunned by the rapid turn of events. Realizing the gravity of his actions, Monk releases the blade and apologizes repeatedly, shocked by his own loss of control. Sylvia, unable to follow the quick movements, is amazed by Ray's ability to intervene so rapidly, an act more bewildering than the duel itself. Monk's remorse extends to both Gary and Ray for his impulsive behavior, understanding that if Ray hadn't intervened, the outcome could have been much graver. The duel's abrupt interruption leaves the audience and bettors in a state of confusion about the winner. Kyle steps in to clarify, announcing that due to the intervention, the match is nullified and bets will be refunded. This decision, however, infuriates the more unscrupulous gamblers in the crowd, leading them to hurl objects towards those in the arena. Despite Kyle's efforts to defuse the situation, it quickly escalates. Ray becomes a target of the crowd's anger, with insults and dangerous items thrown his way, including a stone that strikes him in the head, causing apparent pain. The situation deteriorates rapidly, with the crowd's anger no longer about the duel but fueled by a mob mentality. Monk steps forward to shield the group from the increasingly hostile audience. The chaos intensifies, but thankfully, a potentially dangerous situation involving a brick, aimed by Sebastian's associate, is averted by a timely intervention. Monk's efforts to quell the disturbance earn him the ire of both the goon and Sebastian, who is frustrated at being denied his chance to cause more trouble. Amidst the chaos, the derogatory term red-haired freak is repeatedly hurled towards them, underscoring the hostility and prejudice they face. The duel, already concluded, becomes a distant memory as the group grapples with the immediate threat posed by the enraged mob. Ray finds himself overwhelmed by the harsh words and negative perceptions of those around him. They label him as a curse, a disaster, even wishing death upon him. He struggles to understand why he always seems to be the target of such animosity from these people, feeling each insult burrowing into his very being. The derogatory names, freak, trash, idiot, and more, chip away at his humanity, igniting a desire within his inner dragon to retaliate against the humans who scorn him. Just as the situation threatens to spiral out of control, Sir Winford arrives, commanding immediate silence as he navigates through the chaotic crowd. He commands respect and authority, effectively halting the turmoil. Ray, having sustained considerable injuries, is offered immediate medical attention by Sir Winford, but he declines, more concerned about whether the knight needs him for something else. To Ray's surprise, Sir Winford brings unexpected news. His mother has arrived at the academy. This revelation is entirely unforeseen for Ray, who is led to one of the academy's more pleasant rooms to meet her. Upon hearing his voice, his mother's attention is instantly captured. As they reunite, Ray can hardly believe his eyes. It's truly his mother, whom he hasn't seen in a long time, and he realizes how much he's grown since their last meeting. Ray, more concerned about his father than discussing his own circumstances, inquires about his father's well-being. His mother, not one to sugarcoat the truth, reveals that his father's not dead, but he has left their home and the village. This news is shocking to Ray, especially since his father had been bedridden due to an illness. Now he learns that his father has somehow left, a development that Sir Winford seems to have anticipated. However, the truth about the dreaded plague of shadows remained unspoken by Sir Winford when it came to Ray. It was a sinister affliction, and its victims typically succumbed within a year. Jack, Ray's father, had defied the odds, displaying a remarkable resilience. But eventually, even the strongest survivors found themselves enslaved by the shadows, unknowingly aiding in the plague's relentless spread. No exceptions had ever been recorded in the annals of this dreaded sickness. It was on that day that Scarlet, Ray's mother, came to comprehend the immense struggle Jack had waged against the plague of shadows over the past decade. In their humble abode, she was roused from her slumber by an unexpected noise originating from the dining area. As she investigated the source of the disturbance, she was confronted by the telltale infected footprints, accompanied by a bottle of ink. What was truly astonishing was that Jack, who had been bedridden for the past 10 years, had roused himself to pen a letter. The sight of her husband awake after such an extended period of slumber left Scarlet almost incredulous. Overwhelmed with emotion, she leaped into his arms, embracing him tightly. Yet, as fate would have it, cruelty and complexity intertwined in their lives. Jack harbored an unsettling realization that he could no longer maintain control over his own body. Desperate and tormented, he implored Scarlet to end his life without delay, although he knew it would be an agonizing task she might never bring herself to accomplish. The shadows within Jack were growing increasingly restless, surging and seizing control over his entire being at an alarming pace. His mental faculties deteriorated rapidly, and a grotesque transformation was underway. Jack was undergoing a horrifying metamorphosis into something far removed from humanity, and it was happening with unprecedented swiftness, casting a dark shadow over their lives. Amid the chaos and despair, Scarlet found herself in their blazing home, tears streaming down her face. The remnants of Jack's mind persisted in their torment, beseeching her to end his suffering. Grief and agony gripped her, rendering her immobile. Jack, once a loving husband and father, had been transformed into a grotesque figure that resembled a monster more than a family man. His desperate cries for a swift release from the clutches of the shadows filled the air. Scarlet, in the end, couldn't bring herself to carry out the unthinkable act. After all, Jack was her husband, the man who had raised their son. Clutching the letter that Jack had penned for their son, Scarlet knew that she had to deliver it personally. Regret for not being present during Ray's formative years weighed heavily on her heart. As she and Jack laid eyes on their son, they recognized something truly special in him. Jack's heart swelled with pride, despite his own internal struggles. He longed to apologize for his absence and hoped that Ray would lead the life he desired. Gratitude and love for Ray filled Jack's heart as he watched his son. As Ray absorbed the heartfelt words of the letter, a torrent of emotions washed over him. From bearing witness to the darkest aspects of humanity earlier to feeling the profound love from his father, Ray made a solemn vow to find a way to save his dad, no matter the challenges ahead. With determination in his heart, Ray returned to the dorm room to process his emotions. Meanwhile, Scarlet set out to search for her husband, determined to find him no matter what he had become. Ray wanted to accompany her, but she insisted that he forge his own path, as it was what his father would have wanted. She reassured him with a tight hug and reminded him to focus on his own journey. For Ray, it had been a decade, and he felt like he hadn't made any progress. He grappled with his own feelings of inadequacy and the weight of his responsibilities. Despite his extraordinary abilities, he had never felt more human, unable to exact revenge for his race or protect those he held dear. Everything felt like a hopeless mess. Back in the dorm room, Gary went to check on Ray. He had heard about Ray meeting his mother and was already back in their room. Gary was concerned about Ray's father's well-being, but he knew that Ray was unlikely to open up about it. Something was definitely amiss. As Gary examined the letter that had fallen to the floor, caught by the wind, Dan entered the room and took the letter from his hands, assuming it to be a love letter from a fangirl. Dan playfully teased Gary, hoping to read a passionate love confession. However, as their other roommates arrived, they realized that the letter was addressed to Ray, leaving everyone surprised and perplexed, especially Sylvia. After reading the letter, Gary began to explain its contents to the group. Ray and his family's situation remained a secret to most. They were unaware that Ray's father had fallen victim to the plague of shadows, and Ray had endured a challenging childhood. However, there was a collective decision to treat Ray with greater kindness, if only by a small margin. Everyone could sense the weight of Ray's burdens, and they wanted to alleviate some of it. Needing a brother after the harrowing experiences he had faced as a young boy, Ray sought solace in the cafeteria. Sylvia and Martha, recognizing the toll it had taken on him, approached him and invited him to share a meal together. Unexpectedly, Ray found himself in the unusual position of being the recipient of kindness. Back in the dorms, a similar scene played out. As he neatly folded his clothes and blankets on his bed, Dan and Ian attempted some rather poor acting, pretending that Sylvia had taken care of everything for Ray. Ray was baffled by this sudden change in behavior and couldn't fathom why his friends were acting so differently. The very next day, Ray was taken aback when he spotted Gary placing freshly picked lilies on his bedside. He couldn't help but wonder if Blondie had developed romantic feelings for him. Ray had been noticing a shift in how his dorm mates treated him lately, and it left him puzzled. Gary, feeling guilty, finally confessed to Ray that he had accidentally seen the letter. He apologized for invading Ray's privacy and admitted that he shouldn't have looked at it. Barry, aware of the situation, chose not to involve the others in the conversation. Blondie took responsibility for the situation, admitting that it was his fault that everyone had found out about Ray's letter. He sincerely apologized, and instead of anger, Ray responded with a genuine smile. In that moment, he felt grateful for having such supportive dorm mates. Their brief bonding moment was interrupted when someone rushed to the door as if it were a life-or-death emergency. They carried a severely injured monk, barely clinging to consciousness. Concern and worry filled the room. It turned out that Sebastian was responsible for this. He had provoked Monk into a ranked battle, and it had gone terribly wrong. Ranked battles were supposed to end immediately when one side surrendered, but according to the group, Sebastian had continued to beat up Monk even after he had passed out. It was clear that the beating had been intentional. Weakly, Monk called out to Ray, apologizing for not being able to help him with his bed for the next few days. Ray, without saying a word, headed for the door with the intention of seeking revenge for what had been done to Monk. Gary followed him, urging caution and reminding Ray of the potential consequences. They both wanted justice for Monk, but Ray believed in an eye for an eye. However, Sebastian was from House Delbert, the youngest son of Sir Delbert. Ray knew they needed to tread carefully because getting on Sebastian's bad side could lead to trouble. Ray was determined to seek justice, but through official channels, not recklessness. As Ray approached the training grounds, he noticed the stark contrast between the white belts and black belts. Sebastian, behaving as if he owned the place, roamed the grounds confidently, while the other students sparred diligently. Ray arrived at the site and faced resistance from Sebastian's followers, who blocked his path. Undeterred, Ray inquired about Sebastian's whereabouts, and it seemed their boss had never mentioned having a red-haired friend before. Despite the obstacles, Ray pressed on, determined to confront Sebastian. Ray approached the number 1 glazer, hoping to find Sebastian. However, this guy wasn't exactly the paragon of politeness, ranting about manners and showing irritation at the interruption of their training. Ray didn't pay much attention to his rambling. Sebastian, or Sebas, stepped forward and introduced himself, inquiring about Ray's purpose. It was evident that Ray was here for his friend, and that eliminated the need for small talk. Ray wasted no time and immediately challenged him to a battle, sending a direct request. The people around them burst into laughter, and even Sebastian dismissed the invite with a smug attitude. Sebastian seemed convinced that the fight wouldn't be much of a challenge since Ray's rank was much lower. He justified his earlier beating of Monk by referring to the natural gap between peasants and his kind. Sebastian arrogantly brushed Ray away, but his top henchman had a different idea. Eric, currently ranked 9th in their batch, was willing to fight Ray, and if Ray won, it might catch the interest of others. Sebastian didn't seem to care, so they could proceed with the duel. Ray was determined to face Sebastian but agreed to take on Eric first. The surrounding white belts celebrated the prospect of another fight. Ray, oozing confidence, allowed Eric to make the first move, not even drawing his sword yet. Eric wanted to show off what Sebastian had taught him, and the brat boss observed the impending battle with an amused expression from the sidelines. As Eric approached Ray, it seemed like he expected his lackey to intimidate a young kid. However, Eric was coming at full force, aiming to inflict massive damage. He launched a sharp stab with rage, but Ray effortlessly sidestepped the attack, leaving Eric shocked. Dodging that feeble strike seemed like child's play for Ray. But Eric wasn't giving up so easily. He swung his sword in various angles, challenging Ray to evade his strikes. However, Ray continued to demonstrate his agility, effortlessly sidestepping a chop, leaning back to avoid a wide swing, and even closing his eyes while dodging. Eric couldn't believe his eyes. Ray seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to evade his attacks. Just as Eric was starting to despair, Ray decided to end the match with a single punch to Eric's face. Eric lost his grip on his sword and was sent flying into the wall of the training facility, unconscious and thoroughly humiliated. With number 9 dealt with and on his way to the infirmary, Ray turned to Sebastian and asked if he was now qualified to fight him. Sebastian, still not entirely convinced, wanted to know what he would gain from the fight. Ray didn't hesitate and placed 2 intermediate beast crystals on the line to raise the stakes. Even for someone like Sebastian, intermediate beast crystals were a luxury. Ray explained that his parents, who were adventurers, left these crystals for him. Sebastian, though still skeptical, accepted the challenge. However, he had one condition. He wanted the ranked battle to be held in public for all to witness. Ray had wanted the same from the beginning, as he wanted to prove that he hadn't obtained the crystals through any shady means. They headed to the arena, and it didn't take long for the audience to gather in the stands, eager to witness the upcoming battle. Kyle returned with his trusty coin box, ready for the bets. He couldn't help but worry about Ray going up against the second-ranked guy in their batch. He suspected that Ray might be doing this for a quick buck by selling the match. Kyle's only hope was that Ray could at least give the brat a nosebleed. With that in mind, he went to work, riling up the crowd to place their bets on the upcoming match. In Ray's room, his roommates didn't seem overly confident about his chances in the fight, except for Sylvia, who believed in him. Dan teased her, suggesting that love was making her blind to reality. But Sylvia argued that people were the ones who couldn't see Ray's true strength. Gary shared their concerns but was more worried about potential repercussions from Delbert, that clown, after the match. Before the battle began, Sebastian took the stage for a speech. He spoke about how children of knights would become knights, and children of farmers would become farmers, emphasizing the class boundaries. Sebastian seemed a bit annoyed, feeling that Ray had gained confidence after defeating his lackey. He was determined to show the difference between a master and the second-ranked student. As they prepared to face off, Sebastian couldn't hide his smug and overly confident smile. The crowd held their breath as the countdown for the match began. Ray, wearing his mask resembling the Black Belt Dragon, showed that he was ready to give it his all. The battle finally commenced, with Sebastian charging forward with his blade. The initial collision was intense, nearly stopping Gary's heart, but Ray effortlessly dodged it. Sebastian, in his arrogance, thought it was just luck on Ray's part. Ray didn't waste a moment and launched his counterattack, drawing a shallow cut and drawing first blood. Sebastian, however, underestimated Ray's abilities, thinking that Ray could do only so much with such a small cut. The tension in the arena was palpable as the battle unfolded. Ray couldn't resist asking Sebastian why he talked so much. It seemed like the rich, spoiled kid had a habit of winning battles with his mouth. In a typical fashion, Sebastian took the bait and charged at Ray once again, using the same predictable move, but Ray easily sidestepped it, earning himself 2 quick counters, this time with deeper cuts. Dan and Ian couldn't even keep up with Ray's movements, but Eric noticed something intriguing. Ray's dodging methods seemed identical to that of the premier Dragon Knight Cirque Stabbers. Unfazed, Sebastian enhanced his combat abilities, now incorporating Chai into his attacks, converging it onto his sword. It was like watching a scene from Dragon Ball. The audience realized that this fight was going to be something special. However, Ray showed that technique could trump power as he effortlessly dodged Sebastian's Chai-infused attacks, making them appear in slow motion. Sebastian had learned from his mistake and baited Ray's dodge, planning to follow up with the second part of his combo. Fortunately, Ray managed to raise his wooden sword in time to block the attack. This turn of events boosted Sebastian's confidence, and he unleashed relentless ferocity, earning the support of most of the crowd. However, not everyone was pleased with the reversal. Gary and Sylvia saw the situation clearly and weren't worried about Ray. Blood began to drip onto the floor near Ray's bright white shoes, but the real disadvantage lay with Sir Delbert's son. Despite his repeated attacks, Sebastian couldn't land a clean hit on Ray and was left with painful cuts all over his body. As the truth of the battle became evident to the spectators, concern grew about Sebastian going too far. The tension in the arena continued to mount. As the battle continued, the spectators became increasingly puzzled. To the untrained eye, it seemed like Ray was just dodging Sebastian's attacks. However, for those who knew what to look for, It was evident that Rei was constantly on the offensive. Every time he dodged an attack, he would immediately counterattack. He had been steadily wearing down Sebastian, chipping away at his flesh and stamina. Sebastian's bratty tendencies began to surface as he complained about how Nodu and his father had beaten him like this. With his T convergence pushed to its limit, he mindlessly charged at Rei once more. It was at this moment that Rei decided to strike first with a slash straight to the face. People in the audience were starting to get a glimpse of just how strong Rei truly was. He had an opportunity to win the match immediately, but it appeared that he was intentionally prolonging it, as if he wanted to slowly torture Sebastian. Rei was playing with the spoiled rich kid like an apex predator playing with its prey. His face now covered in deep gashes, Sebastian's rich kid persona emerged even more, and he insulted Rei as a dirt peasant. But Rei had only one goal in mind: proper revenge for his friend, Monk. He didn't care how bloody or messy it got, he was determined to achieve it. With his wooden sword in hand, Rei continued to deliver blows. If Sebastian complained about his face getting hit, Rei made sure to hit it more. This time, he aimed for a broken nose, and the brat was itching to report Rei to his equally trashy father or seek revenge for his ruined face. Even Sebastian's subordinates couldn't help but cringe at the humiliation their leader was enduring. During this short but intense match, Rei came to a realization. Talking to someone like Sebastian was a waste of his time and energy. As Rei raised and swung his wooden sword, Sebastian tried to plead with him to wait, hoping to forfeit the match. But Rei was determined to ensure that Sebastian couldn't forfeit easily. He hadn't yet achieved the proper revenge for Monk. Rei continued to slap Sebastian from left to right repeatedly, and it was clear to everyone that things were taking a dangerous turn. The only thing that could snap Rei out of his slapping rage was the voice of his buddy Monk, who had rushed to the Colosseum to stop Rei from committing a grave offense. Monk's unexpected plea for Rei to stop took Rei by surprise. For a moment, it distracted Sebastian, giving him the chance to forfeit before his face became even more unrecognizable. With that, the brutal match came to an end, and Rei Talon emerged as the victor. As soon as the duel, or rather the slaughter, concluded, Rei wasted no time in leaving the scene. Sebastian's goons rushed to tend to their humiliated master and escort him to the infirmary. But Sebastian, in his battered state, had no interest in pity or medical treatment. All he wanted was vengeance against Rei Talon. He was determined to have the last laugh, and it was clear that this kid needed a serious reality check. Meanwhile, at the Avery and Med Academy's central building, a familiar and annoying figure was expressing their unforgiving stance towards Rei for his actions. On the other hand, Cirque firmly stood by Rei's side. From a knight's perspective, Rei hadn't broken any rules, and Cirque emphasized the importance of adhering to the rules, especially when it came to Delbert. He made it clear that if Delbert genuinely believed Rei had violated the rules, he would have taken immediate action to punish him for disfiguring his son. Cirque's level of hatred for Rei needed some serious examination. Amidst the ongoing debate, one elder found Delbert's words not entirely without merit. The prophecy did suggest that the red-haired boy might bring about the kingdom's destruction, but it also hinted at the possibility that he could be the chosen savior of the world. However, based on recent events, some elders were concerned that Rei had already shown signs of becoming a calamity. Caution was essential. While expelling Rei might seem like a straightforward solution, the consequences remained uncertain, and it could potentially trigger a downfall. The head elder intervened, putting an end to the fruitless debate. It was clear that with everyone holding differing opinions, a resolution wouldn't be reached easily. The situation was put to a vote to determine Rei's fate. Those in favor of expelling Rei were quick to raise their hands. Sir Delbert, the first to vote, was followed by Elder Gibby and a master knight named Rose. Surprisingly, even the head elder voted for Rei's expulsion, alongside Elder Vaughn, who was wearing a COVID-19 mask. On the other side, those opposing Rei's expulsion included the kindly-looking Elder Humphrey, Sir K. Bernardo, and Winford. In total, 3 were in favor of expulsion, 6 were against it, and 2 abstained. The motion to expel Rei Talon did not pass. While Rei was facing the verdict from the higher-ups, he found himself relaxing on the dorm roof. He was feeling comfortable until he heard a sweet and familiar voice calling his name. It was Sylvia, and it seemed like she had been searching for him everywhere. Rei had wanted some solitude for a while, but Sylvia wanted to ensure he was okay. He was actually thinking about Monk, even though they weren't very close. Sylvia seemed to understand what was on his mind. Sylvia had been wanting to talk to Rei, but finding the right words was a struggle. She knew Ray was different from most people, not skilled in conversation or understanding emotions. Ray didn't seem to care about all that. Ray misunderstood Sylvia's intentions, thinking she wanted something more. However, all she wanted to convey was that despite everything, she was certain he was not a bad person. Whenever she saw Ray confused or upset, she wished she could help in some way. She wanted Ray to trust his circle of friends a little more. The mention of friends left a bitter taste in Ray's mouth. Suddenly, he turned around and pushed a shocked Sylvia against the wall. He wanted her to use the dragon eye and see that everything positive about him wasn't true. Deep down, Ray wanted to know if Sylvia was afraid of him after witnessing this inhuman side. Sylvia admitted that she was indeed afraid of Ray at times. Sylvia's earlier words remained true. She didn't believe that this red-haired kid was a bad person, and upon closer inspection, she found his inhuman eye rather pretty. She thought it suited Ray well. Her only wish now was for Ray to stop treating himself like a monster. In her eyes, Ray was not a monster, and that unexpected response left Ray surprised. Even after revealing his inhuman side, Sylvia still didn't see him as a monster. Every time Ray thought he understood humanity, circumstances changed, and he realized he had a long way to go to truly comprehend what it meant to be human. Meanwhile, the meeting on the top floor of the central building didn't go as Delbert had anticipated. He stormed out in anger, no longer caring about the prophecy but still determined to someday kill Laffy and Ray. However, before he could leave, one of the elders, the suspicious Elder Gibby, chased after him. Gibby was intrigued by Delbert's opinion that Mike should only come from noble blood, and he wanted to learn more about Delbert himself. It seemed that something was brewing within the upper echelons of the Avrian Knight Academy. Sylvia descended from the roof and left the dorm. She was approached by a person with lustrous blonde hair who cordially asked if Ray was there. Sylvia directed him upstairs to where Ray was staying. This handsome boy's blonde hair looked familiar, but his charming demeanor made it hard to remember where she had seen him before. Sylvia only realized that he looked recognizable but was not from their year. Ray heard the creaking of roof tiles and assumed Sylvia had returned for some reason. However, he was surprised to find a charming blonde young man holding 2 wooden swords in front of him. The young man introduced himself politely as Harry, or Harry Delbert to be precise, a second-year student. As soon as Ray heard the Delbert family name, annoyance flickered across his face. Harry confirmed that the one Ray had defeated earlier was his little brother. Ray naturally assumed that this guy had come for revenge. However, Harry immediately dispelled that assumption, clarifying that revenge wasn't his intention. He wasn't here for anything so petty. In fact, he wanted to thank Ray. Harry knew how arrogant his little brother could be and that Sibus had never practiced earnestly in the past. He understood that it was only a matter of time before his brother would be defeated, so a bit of a beating for a lesson was a good thing. If there was nothing else, Ray told Harry that he was leaving, but there was no need to rush. They couldn't have a ranked battle because they were not in the same year. However, Harry wanted to teach Ray a lesson as well, all with a bright smile. After all, he still had to do something as an older brother. Ray accepted the wooden sword without a fuss. All that talk, and Harry was essentially here for a fight too. The pretty boy insisted that he just wanted to see how strong Ray really was. Now that he had proposed the duel, he also wanted Ray to take the first move to show what Ray was working with. Ray, who typically didn't like going on the offensive from the get-go, felt a different vibe from this guy. So for this roof battle, he gladly made an exception. Ray's first strike was casually blocked by the pretty boy's one-handed wooden sword. Not only that, but a fierce stare kick-started the release of a powerful aura, coating Harry's wooden sword. This gave Ray quite a shock, and feeling that dangerous presence, he decided to immediately retreat. Harry praised him for making the correct decision on the spot. This was a strange new feeling for Ray. Usually, his opponent's sword would have already broken after that first full-powered attack. Bro is fighting armament hockey users now, Ray thought. He changed his grip to a more primal style. If this continued, his sword would break first. Harry commented that it was obvious Ray didn't know how to use Chai yet. If Ray couldn't win based on pure strength, he would try to do so using the black belt techniques from Cirque. Harry found Ray's relentless attacks praiseworthy, even in the eyes of a more seasoned trainee. However, if that's all he's got, then Harry won't even break a sweat dealing with him. Appropriately, no matter how skilled Ray is when it comes to black belt techniques, nothing seems to be working to retaliate. The pretty boy is determined to show him just how vast the gap is between them. A single stab was unleashed, and Ray managed to block it, but the impact lifted him into the air. The force was so strong that it almost knocked him off the dorm roof. After he managed to halt his momentum, he felt some internal damage and painfully threw up blood. Looking at the trembling kid, Harry looked disappointed that they were going to end here. But given that Ray was clearly out of commission already, the pretty boy decided that this would be it for today. Before Harry could make his way downstairs, Ray painstakingly lifted himself up to ask a question. He wanted to know if this long-haired blondie was the top-ranked second-year knight apprentice. Harry lightheartedly laughed at that question and revealed that he wasn't the top dog. In fact, he was just a middling 50th ranker in his batch. That revelation opened Ray's eyes to the disparity in strength between him and other people. He had been trashed by rank 50 so easily. Harry left with a proposal to fight again after Ray could use chi properly. This thing called chai looked like it could make him stronger than ever if he could learn and master it. Ray was determined to train hard for that day. With that, the narrative concludes. The audience is encouraged to subscribe, hit the bell, and like the video, concluding with gratitude for watching and a promise to return for the next installment.